That one popped up.
Did you log in?
Yeah.
So just give me a verbal yes or no. Yes.
Okay, and that passes. Thank you, everyone. Unanimously, motion passes. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence. Ms. Bosom, would you do the pledge for us today? Thank you.
Say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a respectful moment of silence. God, indivisible, liberty for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a motion to approve the minutes of the July 12th, 2023 regular governing board meeting. Members, is there someone that would make a motion? Or are there any changes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, and I will second that. There has been a motion and a second. Members, when the pop-up comes up, please cast your vote. Okay, thank you, everyone. Motion carries so unanimously. Next is summary of current events. Dr. Spurgeon, you're on deck.
Thank you, Chairman Pingarelli, and governing board members. First thing I want to mention this evening is we received a very special letter from U.S. Senator Kristen Sinema about our awards that we received this past spring, and I wanted to read that letter so all could benefit from this great letter for congratulations for West-MEC. It says, Superintendent Spurgeon, congratulations on the Western Maricopa Education Center receiving 9 awards from the Association for Career and Technical Education of Arizona. These awards speak volumes to your commitment to preserving Western Maricopa Education Center's exceptional career and technical education programs. I am confident that under your direction, the Western Maricopa Education Center will continue to foster excellence in academic engagement in order to benefit all Arizonians. It's a privilege to extend my congratulations on this important day, as this achievement will serve the Western Maricopa Education Center well for years to come. I'm honored to be a voice for your community in the United States Senate. Sincerely, Senator Kristen Sinema. So I just want to say congratulations to all those West-MEC folks that achieved awards and all the great work that happened in the 22-23 school year. So first time we've ever got something from U.S. Senator, so that's great news.
Excellent, excellent.
Secondly, I want to make mention that we've had a tremendous start to the school year. And I've talked not only to West-MEC folks, but folks from other districts that this year seems to be just have a different feeling, a more positive feeling. So I think we're maybe coming more off of the COVID situation. I think kids are feeling more engaged in school. And I think that has a lot to do with how parents approach school, back to school and buying clothes and supplies and getting geared up for the summertime in August when school starts. So I know that's been a blessing for a lot of administrators and teachers across the region. So very glad about our good start to the school year. As last year, I met with each individual building, all 4 of our sites in our corporate and start center. And I do that individually to celebrate our successes and talk about our challenges and our vision moving forward. So I had really good meetings with each of our 4 buildings in our corporate and start center to celebrate those successes and look forward to the 23-24 school year. So great meetings there. I met with Mayor Skip Hall in Surprise and his leadership team for the nomination for the GPEC board. Had a great conversation with him and his team, and looking forward to serving on that committee. I meet with gentleman's name is Chris Camacho. I meet with him, I think, coming up in about a week to 10 days to talk about the work with the GPEC board. So very excited about that. Next thing is I started my individual meetings with our partner superintendents. I met with Brian Capstrand, Glendale Union, and Dr. Curtis Spence with Deer Valley. So I try to meet with them individually, talk about our projects and things that are coming up, and then allow them to talk about things that are going on in their district so we can share strategies and ways in which we can continue to partner together. So very good, very positive conversations. We have a group from New Mexico that's coming to visit West-MEC. There's a couple of gentlemen and a group of folks that are looking to start a West-MEC model in New Mexico. So they're coming to visit us probably within the next month or month and a half. So we're going to share with them all of the great things that have happened here and some of our challenges and some of those roadblocks that we hit as West-MEC became a very positive school district. So we're excited about that one. Met with Dr. Ray Rivera from EMCC about our partnership at the Southwest Campus, looking to continue that and all the great work that's happening there with the articulated programs and the pathways. So we're very excited about continuing that partnership with Dr. Rivera. And then this morning, we had a tremendous meeting with the West-MEC Economic Education Workforce. And Mr. Garcia was there as well. Got a chance to present the great things happening at West-MEC and our projects and our partnerships and the great work that's happening in workforce development. So I thought that was a very great meeting and very well attended. So with that being said, those are just a few things that are coming off of a very short summer.
Yes, Dr. Spurgeon, thank you very much. Excellent report. Okay, let's move on to governing board members. Members, is there anyone that would like to give a update on a summary of current events? Oh, Mr. Miglerino, thank you.
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to attend the ASBO conference in Tucson 2 weeks ago. It was nice to see so many of our folks there that were both attending the meetings and also presenting. We did our annual scholarship fund run on Thursday night, collected roughly $2,000. The winner was a school employee, Roy Cecilak. He took the $1,000. You know, if a vendor usually gets it, they give it back. But we did pick up $1,000 that can be used for scholarships. I'm very proud of that and thank the people that were all involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Miglerino. Any other members? Ms. Wiley?
I just I attended 3 of the orientations last week. One at Northwest, one at Southwest, and the other one over at 19 Northeast. And it was just really interesting. I mean, they weren't very long, but it was good to see the parents and the students and then the presentations. They're great. It's a lot of excitement. It's good.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other members?
Just a
Mr. Ramirez.
quick comment. I overheard this weekend and saw an article about TSMC and how they're planning on maybe delaying their opening because of a shortage of technical talent. Just reminded me immediately of the important work that West-MEC does in training and educating that future technical talent. And hopefully, I mean, we're pretty small compared to the numbers that they need, but it just shows the importance of the training and the programs that we have, how important it is for the community here.
We'll be able to build that talent pool once we get the Northeast project up and rolling. And I was visiting with Miss Wiley as well, is we also do some fast tracking and all those boot camps through the Stray Mountain Community College on the Southwest campus. So we're still continuing to add to that pipeline, but it's going to continue, the need is going to continue to get even greater. It's not going to diminish in any way. So if there's ways we're working hard with Scott Holman and his crew to see if there's any way possible that we can continue to partner with him, we will.
You know, one of those I did hear, and I hesitate to add because we're not.
Let's members, let's not start another discussion.
Could I just ask a question of the superintendent?
Well, this is a summary of current events, and I would really like to stay on track. So if you want to make a comment about it, I will recognize you. But otherwise, let's and you can ask a question within that.
I'll put it in the form of a comment.
Thank you.
One of the things I've seen about TSMC, and my daughter did work there for a while, their biggest challenge is they require a lot of their staff to speak Mandarin. And that's a barrier to get people into our job market. Is there anything we might be able to do to help facilitate that requirement as well? that's a very unique, doesn't. Mandarin is not at the top end. So anyway, that's just the other part of that story that I would say is something to maybe look at.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cirque. Ms. Boozer.
And then I also attended a student orientation at the Central Campus for the aviation maintenance and drone technology and all that. And I have to say, it was just packed, and I was really happy to see that. And a lot of the new students that are just starting, how enthused they were. It was great.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Garcia. Yes.
So last week I got to attend a NASWA conference, which is a workforce conference. It's a national organization. And a lot of the talk was on that workforce development, which includes the students of high school CTEs. A lot of states, they're still walking around with question marks over their head on how they could implement things. When I mentioned West-MEC, they well, I want to know more. So it's very interesting of how this program is really a step above that some states just can't figure out. So I think you're probably going to get a lot more interest coming. I did brag about it a lot. So I think it's going to be interesting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would just like to add one comment, thanking Dr. Spurgeon and members of the cabinet for I would say within less than half a day resolving a constituent issue with a student at a school that we serve and resolving it so that they could join one of the programs at West-MEC. There was some kerfuffle with some items, but it was resolved. And I want to thank Dr. Spurgeon and members of the cabinet for resolving that. Thank you all very much. Thank you. So let's move on to section C, which is reports. And up is the Paradise Honors High School CTE program report.
Good evening. So such a privilege to be here. Thank you. So Chairman Pigarelli, the board, Dr. Spurgeon, we really appreciate being part of West-MEC. I put in I'm going to speed through these and not go too long on them, but I put in some info about Paradise Honors. We're a public charter and we are new to West-MEC. And I'm just excited that we are a part because our students are really benefiting from being a part with you. So I will go ahead. The mission, every student, every day, and you see that, that is always up everywhere. And that is what they emphasize with the teachers. And I put in some enrollment demographics right now, and things sometimes change, but we were 1,024 students when I turned this in. And 53% of our students on campus are part of a CTE, they're in a CTE program. 40 more students are in one of your West-MEC central programs besides. So, you know, I guess as I wanted to highlight some of this, I was reading your website. I used to come as CTE director for Wickenburg. I was a principal CTE director there, retired. Now I'm with Paradise Honors, but I just so love CTE. And Dr. Pingarelli, I pulled a quote from the website. You said CTE benefits all students, both college and industry bound. And that was what I really wanted when I shared some of my information with you in this report. I really want to emphasize, because I mean, we haven't got our grade yet this year, but we're usually even in A school. We have 47% last year that took an AP exam, and yet we have a higher percent taken CTE. That says something. I think you're seeing a shift with what's important to students. No matter where they're headed, the CTE programs give them the skills they need to be successful wherever they're going. So I did just throw this in real quick, but those are some of the things, like I was saying, where we are known for being top academically. I pulled also, that's really small, you can't hardly see it, but I pulled, for instance, our graduation rate with the state. This is a CTE report, so it's slightly different than other reports, but our graduation rate is how high. Our reading, our math, our science, local performance way higher than any of the state performance. Paradise Honors students are really excelling. I did cut off some of the other things, but like we were 100% on our industry certifications, on our technical skill assessments last year. It's just exciting to see. It's probably why, yes, I did retire. People were like, Rose, what are you doing? But it's so exciting to be part of CTE and what's happening and to see students' lives transformed. So there I am, because I love being there. This is showing you our 2-year so far, because that's how long we've been the CTE program with the state. And you can see our enrollments, and you know, I am highlighting tonight some students and a teacher from business management. And if you look at our numbers, they have doubled this year. You know, and part of that, I mean, they're just, that program has been going, you know, only the 2 years and stuff, but the students are definitely seeing where it takes them as far as skills and leadership and so on. But those are our numbers. And Law and Public Safety is a brand new program that we're just starting rolling out this year. But again, so my enrollment for CT this year for kids on campus, 548. You can see that's a lot of kids in CTE. And so we're pretty excited about that. I'm going to go through our programs that we have just real quick. So digital photography, and we wrote down some of the concepts. Again, I did put in a lot of slides, so I'm going to go through fast. They did compete last year in regionals and state. Graphic design, we have a brand new teacher that just graduated, so I threw in her graduation picture. Anyway, and they competed regional and state. That was a video for, there we go, for the skills leadership camp. Engineering program, we just started that last year. So we're only on our 2nd year with that. And then there's the new law and public safety teacher. And then business management, we have 2 teachers out. This teacher, Sarika, teaches 3 sections a day. And then the teacher that came tonight with me, Denise Rogers, teaches all day business management. And there she is with her family. But anyway, and they are a big part of CTE too, because she's always at all these CTSO activities. But anyway, so she has taught 26 years. And as she shared with me, and I've known her for years before Paradise Honors, she has taken, other than 1 year in teaching business classes, only 1 year, her first year, has she not taken students to nationals. Part of that's her enthusiasm, and part of that is her knowledge. She really, really does a really good job in covering those standards and helping students really get excited about it. And I did go through fairly fast, but Denise Rogers, I'm going to have her take over here, and I'm going to have her just briefly, because I feel like sometimes hearing from the teacher and the students is probably the most exciting part for you. So Denise, I will turn it over to you. Explain then some of those things that you cover that help those students be successful.
Hello, thank you for having me here tonight to go through. And I am the business management teacher. I taught in Wickenburg prior to coming down to Paradise, and then helped start their CTE program there, which has been quite the adventure, I have to say. Start from ground zero. Our business management program was our kickoff program for our CTE, and you can see our areas of study. So we kick it off with some basic just technology, making sure our kids can actually communicate with any kind of tech, regardless of industry they go into. We spend some time in Microsoft Word, where we make sure we're also integrating in an FBLA competition piece, which is the resume and cover letter job interview component. So we're trying to weave in those competitive components at the same time, when giving all students, even if they're not choosing to be part of FBLA, real world stuff, so they can walk out with a very valid resume that isn't just like the cheesy ones with bullets on the sides. Well, then we move into ownership and general management. During this time, I actually have the students decide on a business of their own, which carries forward into a number of our other units and allowing them just to really connect and own something with it as they move through the different units. We do financing where we have a number of financing pieces in there, a lot with personal finance. We're actually looking to tie this with the personal finance seal. I'm hoping to do that this year as I literally just learned some of the features we were doing. We're hitting almost all of it already. So integrating a few more pieces so our students can walk out with a personal finance seal on their diplomas is one of my goals. We touch into marketing, which of course has become a larger standard on our new curriculum pieces. And this is where students take that same business that they've created, and now they've got to create a marketing component for that business, again, creating that ownership for them and helping them connect. The PowerPoint unit, again, using all those industry components, really want them to move towards getting industry certification. So we do PowerPoint. Again, I've integrated in a FBLA competitive event, the electronic career portfolio as their final component in there as well. So students are getting some more pieces. Our second year program then moves into human resources at the very beginning, moving in then into our industry certification, which is our customer service through Rise Up. We have had 2 years of 100% certification with our students in this program at this point. It's been very, very successful. I expect to keep my 100% going. Then we move into micro and macro economics. I'm also a certified economics teacher. And with the new, they've just rolled it out earlier this year, the crosswalk for business management and economics. We're hoping to go to our board and get that crosswalk and acceptable for our students who take business 1 and business 2, or it's 1, 2, 3, 4. They've changed their names this year, where they're allowed to get their economics credit by taking the program in its entirety. So there'll be more reasons for them to jump in there as well. Then we move into payroll, insurance, and budgeting. The budgeting one, we have a lot of fun. I make them do a cookie budget. They actually have to pretend they're going to sell cookies on campus. They have to research all the pieces to it and create a very elaborate budget to present to class. They actually love it. It turns into a ton of fun. They realize there's a lot more into just a cookie than they thought. Then we move into doing the program overview to get them ready for the state testing. I like to integrate in a book called ZAP, which it's an older book, but it's about empowerment. It's about this time. It's really small, but it's done in a fantasy setting, but it literally takes of someone who was a really bad manager and shows a full progression as it becomes very good, and it causes a full development change in the business. So it hits tons of their standards again as they get ready to move into the exam. They can really see those applications and have to point them out as we go in. And we wrap up year 2 with Excel. Because that one's not on the state test. So it's a great way to wrap up the end of the year and them still getting additional, we go deeper into it. They use it for their budgeting, but we want to take them deeper into some of those skill sets there. And this year we have started our very first 3rd year program. I only have 9 students in there, but they are very, very excited. And the really cool part is every single one of them is an athlete too, which if you haven't been in the classroom at all, getting an athlete to also be part of CTSO and active can be very, very hard. And every single one of those students is a varsity athlete. So I have been super excited this year to have them be part of it. They're going to be part of our leadership team. They are running. We got to work with the football boosters, and we collaborated to run the concession stand with them this year. It has been a huge undertaking, but we are getting it figured out as we move through and how we move our way through the school system. The kids have done all their ordering now. They've written their requisitions. They did their research. They've now determined their pricing. So they're getting lots of experience, and they get to be the manager for a half of each game. So we can rotate all those kids around and get that experience where they have to be the one that troubleshoots first before they come see me. And that is the quick and dirty of my program. I do have 2 students here today because we have been very successful in FBLA. Our 2 years that we have done FBLA, we've gone to nationals both years with a number of students. I have 2 students here because all the rest have just graduated. The gentleman, you want to join me? Both of these students have done 2 years at nationals. They are seniors this year, so they went as sophomores and as juniors. I absolutely expect that they will do it again this year because they've done it twice. They'll probably do it a 3rd time around. I have a couple of questions for them just to kind of get them started. Feel free to ask them any questions if you'd like to know more once they answer the 2 questions. So my first question, either one of you can answer one of them as you like, is what attracted you to take the business management program?
I am like an entrepreneurship kind of person, and so when I joined this class, I was expecting to learn how to do budgeting and all that like nifty stuff that comes with owning a business or running a business. And so I just took it to learn all those like fundamentals. And then I kind of learned pretty quickly that it wasn't just about business. It was more about like how to get a job and like life skills. And so it's really helped me because I'm kind of in a place where it's nice for me to like have a quality of life, kind of like job placement.
Mikey?
For me, what really attracted me to FBLA was not only the business component of it, but also the wide variety of technical and also professional, competitive and collaborative pieces as well. Within FBLA, there are hundreds of thousands of students across the nation and also internationally. That provides students with a huge opportunity to learn from our peers and get different mentors also from around the world. And I am a huge IT nerd. And a big component of business is IT. Everybody needs it. Everybody has data. And FBLA not only provides the business perspective, but also the technical perspective. And that's what really kind of gravitated towards me.
So, and as you can see, he's wearing one of your West-MEC shirts because he is what I like to call a double dipper. Both of these are completer students in the business program, and he's gone on and is in the second year program in the IT program as well. So he actually plays in both Skills USA and the FBLA arena for us. And I have a second question. So why stay as an officer even though neither one of you are planning on pursuing a major business?
I enjoy having a leadership role in a club that I like. I just love to be in like FBLA because it's more of like it's less of a club where it's like all work and there's no fun in it. And I really enjoy the aspect that there's like longer fun in it and then in the same subject area. Because it's not very common if you run into somebody that really knows IT stuff. So it's very nice running into people that kind of know what you're talking about. It's not just gibberish. And so I just wanted to stay an officer so that I can kind of refine my skills down to know exactly how stuff works and kind of improve on what I already know. And hopefully make sure that my future, if I do a lot of budgeting and like money related stuff. And so being treasurer is definitely nice for me. Get to deal with actual money, not just play money. For me, for my chapter, Paradise Honors, I am the president. Last year, I was the historian. I was kind of feeling my way out, and last year, trying to figure out what I kind of like, what I want to do. In my senior year, I decided that ultimately president is what I want to go for, because I do want to bring in a culture and also a work experience into my chapter that I can pass on throughout multiple officer teams, even though I am gone. One that brings about nationally competitive students and also students that bring out the best in our community as well. I still am an officer, although I'm not pursuing a particular business degree in college, is because within FBLA, I can still expand upon my knowledge through industry level competitions, and within those competitions, they have applicable real world scenarios that you will see from every day in the business. I recently completed a internship through SRP, working with their DCS engineer, and what I learned from FBLA is almost directly correlating to what I see out in the field within SRP. And I can also attribute a lot of my success to West-MEC. Your programs work, is what I can say. Bradley Whitaker, the instructor of both the year 1s and 2s, he is an amazing instructor. And this last year in Atlanta, I placed 3rd in networking design and networking infrastructures. And we attribute a lot of that to the business management program to get the business side and West-MEC to get the technical side as well. What he didn't tell you is that he was fourth place in state to turn around and go and be third at the national level, which we lovingly get it. There's our program at Tucson, the students that we took with us. There were quite a few students who walked away with awards. And these are some of those students that we had in various places. We had a number of first places throughout the state. And then again, this is us at, so I think we were at Six Flags there. It was really hot this year in Atlanta. Very hot in July. And then Mikey, because we were very proud of him for his third place at nationals. Is there any questions you'd like to ask?
Thank you, thank you. Members, any questions, comments? Mr. Garcia?
I got a question. So now that you got, it's for both of you, now that you've been through the programs, you had a lot of training, what do you think we can do better? What's missing?
Ooh, that's a hard question to answer on the spot. One thing I would definitely do is try to implement more work-based experience and get our hands on more with the actual industry itself instead of being isolated in more of the classroom. Because me going out of my way and doing the SRP internship, I feel like I learned so much that I feel like I would never have learned inside the classroom. So being able to integrate a way to almost bring the industry inside the classroom is something that can be worked on.
Yeah, it's good feedback.
I actually don't attend West-MEC. But you could talk about the business management program. I think this year, she's already kind of implemented it with the workplace learning. I wish I could have joined the business 3 class when I was a junior, and they didn't offer that class at the time. But being able, like, if I was able to get that experience, kind of like what Mikey said, of working in the zone, kind of learn how to manage other people instead of just managing yourself and your time. Having that experience inside, like, as Mikey said, the classroom is definitely nice, and it's one of those things that you can't replace with anything else. It's one of a kind.
Thank you. Members, other questions, comments?
This might be to the teacher. And I heard this just recently because I was trying to help one of my grandchildren. They were applying for a job. And I was told, and I can't even remember where I heard it, that resumes, if you, like, let's say that you are going to apply to be a building inspector for a municipality, and you might get 100, 200 applications for that job, that they put it through AI and they're looking for particular words. Is that, so do you deal with that?
Oh, yes, I have for a number of years, actually, because it's not just
Really?
AI. Prior to that, it was actually a pre-programmed program where they were, whenever you have an automatic upload, like you're uploading the resume, they are literally running it through a program looking for keywords. So we really do teach the kids to pay attention to the job description and grab those keywords, and they've got to integrate them into their cover letters and resumes.
Put the job description words into your resume.
Because then it gets it flagged and pulled to the top so that it actually gets read.
That's great that you're teaching her. You gotta be a jewel of a teacher.
Love her very much.
Did I understand correctly, this is the second year of the CTE program, or you just completed the second year?
We have completed, yes, because we did industry testing just this last year. So this is our third year, which is why these gentlemen finished previously. And we've rolled into a third year. They actually got a little bit of a jump start. We started the program, just the school's like, hey, we see you have a CTE license. Why don't you teach business? We were not set up as a CTE program yet, so it started as a business elective. And then we've rolled during COVID. We actually spent a lot of time moving us through the state route to become a full CTE program. So officially, we've only completed 2 years as a CTE program. So last year was our first year of TSA testing.
The percentages are impressive. Both there's enthusiasm from both you and the principal, and I appreciate that as a board member to see the enthusiasm. And I would say 4% of your students coming to West-MEC Central programs is outstanding. Especially from a charter school, we don't see a lot of that. When you talk about personal finance and stuff, do you teach about credit management, and FICO scores, and because I sell houses, and one of the biggest things I see is people don't understand how they can wreck their credit,
Oh, yeah.
and then they're playing catch up.
So we actually, I do go through all this as I use Next Gen Personal Finance for some pieces. We also use EverFi, which is a program that is part of the personal finance seal that's coming out. And I also integrate across the whole year. This is the first year we're gonna do that because we just got our hands on it. Thank you to funding from West-MEC, the Knowledge Matters Personal Finance Simulation Program, which actually makes them, one, get an apartment in the simulation, as well as purchasing houses and cars. So yeah, we definitely go into using the FICO score. I have a full lesson literally on what are the parts and how do you fix the parts and how easy it is to destroy those very quickly with your score. And then spinning off of that Knowledge Matters, there is my second year students do the business one. So they are doing business simulations and have to set the floor up and run the business and hire and fire and supervise inside the simulation there. So your funding is well appreciated for those particular simulations to be interacted into the classroom.
Thank you. And I would like to just add that as Mr. Strunka said, the enthusiasm that you all had today was really remarkable and much appreciated. And gentlemen, I have to say that FBLA is rather fond in my heart because both of our daughters, particularly our older daughter, went through those programs in high school, and now they're both successful in a very large asset management company in Manhattan, and the skills and the discipline and the knowledge that they gained through some of the things that you've described today were really, they're quintessential to move your success and trajectory forward. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Garcia.
And you see though, business management, I mean, double the amount of kids this year in those classes. You can kind of see why. They're seeing real knowledge they can apply to any career. So anyway, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is legislative and business partnership update. Mr. Williams, thank you. Welcome to the podium.
Thank you, Chairman Pingarelli, members of the board, Superintendent Spurgeon, for the opportunity to provide a update on all things legislative and business development, business partnership. That's a tough act to follow, I will say. Great job, Rose and Paradise Honors. I think I liked the agenda better when I went before all that, set the bar high. But I will start with legislative affairs. So we have adjournment of the first regular session of the 56th legislature, July 31st. So that put us at 204 days, which is a record. Everybody likes to talk about the records and the longest session and the most vetoes, and everybody's keeping their own respective scorecards. But it did go down as the longest history or longest session in Arizona's history. And adjournment came after a day of some good debate around what is referred to as the Prop 400 bill. And this is a ballot referral that will ask voters to extend a Maricopa County transportation half-cent sales tax. We talked about this a little bit back in June. And this passed both the House and Senate, and the governor signed SB 1102 on, I believe, the first, the next day after adjournment. So this is a ballot referral and will go to Maricopa County voters in November of 24. real quick, just, I won't go through all the details, but in brief, this is a 20-year, about $24 billion transportation tax, and it is split funding freeways and highways, main arterial streets and public transportation. So 40.5% going to freeways, highways, 22.5% going to major arterial streets, and 37% to the maintenance and operation of public transportation. It's very clear in the spending plan that none of these funds can go to extend light rail. It can only be used to maintain existing light rail out of that 20 or 37%. And as part of some of the negotiations around Prop 400 to get that across the finish line, Hobbs agreed to sign SB 1131, which was the referred to as the rental tax ban. So that, and she made good on that. So that bill was signed, and that was one that she had previously vetoed. So that put us at about just over 1,500 bills introduced this session, 205 at my count, of those being enacted. And again, with a record 143 vetoes. Of hundreds of education related bills introduced, just over 200 were heard in committee and fewer than 20 becoming law. I'll provide the governing board, as part of our weekly board report, a link to each of those K-12 public education related bills that became law, just links to the summary of each of those, as opposed to going through each of those this evening. And you'll remember again, while the session adjourned the end of July, the $17.8 billion spending plan was passed back mid-May. And that had some predictability to it, and it gave us the opportunity to have some certainty going into the fiscal year in public education, which was good for us. With the adjournment, it puts the effectiveness date, unless otherwise noted in the legislation, it puts the effectiveness date at October 30th, 2023. Again, unless otherwise noted in the legislation. Looking ahead, as we go into this new school year, Dr. Spurgeon and I will continue to build those relationships with legislators and other elected officials and leaders across the state and the region to build their capacity and understanding of the value of current technical education and West-MEC's place in the education and workforce development ecosystem. And that work will start pretty quickly. And in the fall, and we'll certainly keep the board apprised of the dates, we're going to host a legislative breakfast just to update them on, and it'll be more West Valley, West-MEC focused, where we'll invite West Valley legislators to attend that event. We'll also do a West Valley mayor breakfast. That's something we've not done before, but they're definitely important stakeholders. So we want to get them together to convene around how we can work together to support the growth of the West Valley and equip our young people with the skills they need to be successful in career and life. Business development. Hang with me here. We've been busy. Again, as Dr. Spurgeon mentioned, as part of our back to school visits, I had the opportunity to kind of piggyback on his vision, presentation and goals and celebrations from last year to talk about our strategic partnerships and our partnership principles, and really ensure that all West-MEC employees have a shared understanding of what that looks like, what an impression is, what engagement is, what is a strategic partnership. So at all levels, we're kind of moving forward in the same direction and have a shared understanding of how we partner with business and industry or other stakeholders. So that was well received, and our intentionality around strategic partnerships is already starting to pay off. We're very excited about the strategic partnerships with Universal Technical Institute and what opportunities that yields for students, with Core Power, with Nestle, with TSMC, and a couple of things that have resulted from those partnerships. One is specific to UTI. Mr. Welch and I met with their leadership last week. We've been asked to provide a webinar podcast through NCLA. And Stephen, I said I was going to remember what NCLA stands for, but you'll have to remind me.
Sure. National Council for CTE Administrators.
See, those letters don't match up, which is why I always forget. So this is really CTE leaders across the country. And they host a regular webinar and podcast, and they've asked that we highlight this partnership and the impact that it has on students. And we've got some very tangible examples that we're going to be able to provide as part of that webinar. Also, key to our strategic partnerships, Core Power recently hired a manager of state and local affairs based in Buckeye. So I'm meeting with Edwin Hernandez Vargas next week. And we've got great communication with Core Power, but it's going to be that much better with a local presence and someone that we can meet with. And he's going to tour the Southwest campus next week. Mr. Guy coordinated a visit with APS and Palo Verde human resources and recruitment teams out on our Southwest campus. So it was good to revisit our partnership with Palo Verde that was very kind of nuclear Palo Verde focused, but to expand that to the broader APS opportunities that exist for students in alignment with all of our programs. So that was a good visit at the Southwest campus. I want to talk briefly about Natterburg, our newest member district, as of July 1. They joined the West-MEC family, and they've got big plans out there in the Whitman area, and they're have a new site to build a high school. I believe it's called Mountainside High School. And it's funded through state school facilities board money. So they had to submit their site plan to the SFB. And as part of that, they included language in there that would allow for West-MEC to have programming out at that site or build central programming at that site in the future. It doesn't obligate us to do that, doesn't commit us to do that. But because it's SFB funded, they needed to get pre-approval should we want to do that in the future. And as part of those conversations, we had the opportunity to connect with the Wickenburg Community Hospital and have some conversations with their CEO and COO. And those were very enlightening conversations that we had last week. We know that the healthcare shortage is kind of at that critical point. And those rural communities are certainly not exempt from those challenges. In fact, they're probably more impacted by that because of the rural nature of where they sit and the local workforce that they have at their fingertips. So through Mr. Welch's good work and Dr. Spurgeon's vision, we were able to kind of talk about what we currently have in place that we can start working with them to connect our students with those opportunities in Wickenburg and the surrounding regions that they serve. And then long-term kind of start to look at what that might look like to offer some programming out in that region.
CJ also want to mention that the Wickenburg would also have space still to lease at the same high school space as well.
In my district.
I think so. It starts at just west of 303, way north of there and goes that way.
Whenever you go.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It's a
We'll
neat.
pack lunch and head west.
Pardon me?
We'll pack lunch and head west. We'll go out there. They would love that.
Can be really one other thing. One things that I learned was some folks are having to drive over 200 miles just to get to health services. And in the community, in the rural hospitals. And so if you haven't a chance to tour Wickenburg, they have some of the latest and greatest technology. It's a smaller facility. But the hands-on experience that our kids are going to be able to get while they're there is just will be second to that. Very, very, very great conversation and a very exciting partnership. Looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was very impressive to see the services. They're a trauma level 4 facility, which that were the definitions of that. So I think they're second to kind of the lowest level of services provided, but because of where they sit, they're oftentimes the closest facility that they would then stabilize them there and get them transported maybe to a trauma 3 or 2, depending on the need. But the amount of services that they've packed into that little community hospital is pretty unbelievable. It's a great community resource. They take great pride in it. So it was, yeah, great visit last week.
One last comment, Jimmy. The last thing is, in the interim, there are things that we can do to transition students that actually reside in the Wickenburg community. For example, if you're a medical assisting student or if you're a nursing student, they can actually work on the work-based learning in the rounds at the Wickenburg Community Hospital. So we can already get that process started well before we have a facility in the area. If you're a pharmacy technician, medical assisting, nursing, I mean, they need welders, they need electricians. There's a lot of things we can do to set those processes in place well before the facility gets built out. So we have that streamlined. So it'll be good.
Additionally, we've continued to advance our conversations with Innovation 27 in the city of Phoenix. That's previously known as the old Kmart off Northern and I-17. So they have identified the architects for the project as well as the general contractor for the project. Again, all those site developments and renovations are being paid for by the city of Phoenix. West-MEC, the Maricopa Community Colleges, and ASU have been invited to collaborate on the project to offer training programs at the space. West-MEC's been very consistent in really a focus on credentialing programs. We're looking specifically at refrigeration technician. That would be a new program of its kind, would probably draw at minimum some regional attention, but likely national attention. And it would be in part a public-private partnership where the AMS group who manufactures, installs, and maintains commercial refrigeration displays would come in and outfit the training facility. We would provide the curriculum and the instructor that would result in those credentials. Additionally, we've talked about a pathway in dental assisting that would lead to the dental hygienist program through Maricopa Community Colleges. And lastly, I had the opportunity, as Mr. Welch filled in for me last month, I had the opportunity to present at the STEM Leadership Alliance Summit representing CTE workforce development. So they're really starting to connect the two pieces. And from that, there's been several follow-up requests that have resulted as people learned about all that's happening at West-MEC and current technical education here in the West Valley. So we've got, I've roped Jared Guy into a follow-up meeting this week with Mass Tech out of Massachusetts, who's really wanting to embark on an initiative specific to manufacturing industries. And they want to learn about what we've done in this space in program development and the partnerships we've developed with Nestle and Core Power and TSMC. So word's getting out, and we're excited about that because we're very proud of the work that's happening here and proud to be part of the national conversation. With that, I stand for any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Members, any questions about this report?
I would be curious, I think it's the I-8 corridor. And suspected growth that after 303, I think that's the next path. How do we see West-MEC's future down that corridor? Or what does that look like? Have we thought that far?
There's a couple of items that we can't talk about publicly, but we're meeting with a couple of folks that could potentially be at least somewhat in that area. But I'm not in the A corridor. I've never been there, so that I've never been to Gila Bend, so that's a place I plan to visit.
Well, I'm talking the I-8 corridor to Vegas.
Okay. Oh, then do 11.
Is it 11?
I-11.
11, I'm sorry, 11, 8. I can't remember these fictional numbers.
So what I'm speaking that I can't speak of would help in that area.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then that Prop 400, that's just Maricopa County, right?
Correct. Yes.
So
Yeah.
Maricopa
It's,
County.
yeah, and I dug up a little research on that, and I would have to bring my notes for sure, but there was some legislation that required the spending plan be approved by the state legislature, even though it was a Maricopa County initiative. There's lots of little pokey angles to that one, so, but yes, it is just Maricopa County.
So there's no home rule on that one.
No, and it's part of it is because Maricopa County is huge. So it's certainly an impact to the state and how funding and where it's allocated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the back to school report. Mr. Walsh, you have the stage.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Pringarelli, Chairperson, Governing Board Members, Superintendent Spurgeon. I appreciate Mr. Williams talking about records because another record, of course, a record-breaking start of the school year. It has been phenomenal. I have never witnessed harder working teachers, campus staff, leadership, working to serve students in our community. And it really has resulted in great numbers. We continue to connect with family members and resonate. So Ms. Lissam, Ms. Wiley, what you witnessed at orientations, right? We continue to see that engagement in enrollment numbers. So you have in front of you, of course, a report that looks like this, but I would tell you that those numbers continue to change each day. So Since since what you have in front of you, we've increased another 21 students, so almost, 2,550 students. Half of those 21, since you've seen this report, half of those come from charter school and homeschool environments. So the work at the direction of the board and superintendent to connect with our charter families, which you saw evidence with Paradise Honors tonight, and homeschool families is really paying off as well, that 50% of these new students are coming from those communities. So just really great engagement, not only are they coming, right, but our attendance continues to be just through the roof. The state average attendance in Arizona is 90%, slightly over the national average of 88%. West-MEC's average attendance is 94%. So when you imagine, these students are going to their home schools, like the young folks you saw today, going to their home schools all day and then coming to us and maintaining a higher attendance average than elsewhere, really speaks to that engagement and the family connection. At those orientation meetings, I continue to be impressed with, one of Dr. Spurgeon's visions, of course, is us leaning into career literacy, really making sure students have an identified career path. And you see parents' faces just light up on those orientation nights when they see those trees and know that their student is being connected with skills to lead them to a path towards economic independence. We continue to really stress that work this year. The data on here is just kind of routine data that you're used to seeing, but I draw your attention to that second page. You can just see, of course, this year we offer those 29 unduplicated programs. That's one more than last year. And that is because medical laboratory sciences is a brand new program. These new programs, this is the first time that we're 90% at capacity at this point, right? Through the 10th day, we can continue to add students. So we'll add a couple more over the next few days, but we're already 90% full, which is great because we've always hovered around that 87%. So to be 90% full right now is really phenomenal. Thanks to this board's work last year to give us tools to recruit new teachers, we were able to bring back our precision machining program and our water program. Those are both programs that had been dormant for a couple of years because of recruitment of personnel. But with the new tools you put in place with the superintendent's vision, we were able to recruit, successfully put a teacher in front of students for these first day of schools for those programs. So I wanted to make sure that I thank you for that and really just know that, I appreciated the comments that at the beginning and the evening with, both Dr. Pringarelli and Mr. Garcia, we're doing what others haven't figured out how to do yet. Dr. Pringarelli, we are serving students, right? That's what it's all about, is serving our families and students. The folks behind me and on our campuses are extremely student-centric, are incredible problem solvers, figuring out what no one else has done to be the best in the state and to serve our families. So we appreciate, when you hear a family that we can engage with even more, thanks for the heads up. We appreciate that and look forward to serving these, 2,555 families this year. With that, I continue to invite you on our campuses to see it in action. That's where the magic's at. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Next is call to the public. This is an opportunity for regular meetings for district residents, staff members, parents, and students, and then we address the governing board during the session's order of business. The public may address the governing board during the call to the public segment of this agenda. Let me just forego, are there any? There are none, so we will move on. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Next is the section F, which is the consent agenda that was revised. This, let me just ask members, first of all, before having them, is there any item on the consent agenda a member would like to pull?
Yes.
Okay, Please,
One.
F1,
I'd like to pull 1 and 3.
1 and 3, okay? Are there any other items? Okay. Items 1 and 3 will be pulled. So for the remainder of the consent agenda, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of items 1 and 3. Can I get a motion?
Oh.
Okay,
Motion.
thank you. That's an enthusiastic motion. Ms. Buzz, very enthusiastic. And since there are no takers, I will second that motion very enthusiastically. Okay, so we have a first and a second to approve the consent agenda with the exception of items 1 and 3. Members, please cast your votes. So there are 6 yeses and 1 abstention. So we will, motion carries. So we will now move into, I think 2 people requested item 1.
So Dr. Pingerelli, let me explain. With board docs, I have to actually move it to action discussion in order to change. Because
Okay.
I can't change the motion within that. So I will actually add it to action discussion items. And do you
Okay.
want me to move them to the beginning or the end of the action discussion items? So I can add them as 1 and 2 or add them as 5 and 6.
But these discussions will proceed subsequent right now.
It's up to you. I can add them as 5 and 6 and you can actually discuss them first if you want to discuss them first or discuss them last.
We can discuss them first
So give me a minute to move them.
to move them, okay?
Everyone could just hit your reload and just reload your board docs. It should be added as action discussion items 1 and 2.
Ms. Brown, I think I'm trying to need.
Just gonna refresh, so sometimes if you just go to meetings there first.
Okay, so under G, action discussion, we have item number 1. Thank you, Ms. Brown, for getting that nicely arranged. And let's see, I think there were a couple people that called to have this removed. I think either Mr. Strucka or Ms. Wiley. So if one of you want to proceed with your.
Well, it's just that I'm not familiar with grants and I'm reading this and I'm going, that sounds kind of strange. So I'd like you to explain it.
To be pulled as consent as routine and regular.
This is not.
We've never
routine.
provided
Right.
transportation, so it's not routine. So I think it's in the best interest of the board to hear what we're gonna do. And so that's why I asked for it to be.
Yeah, a little more details. I mean, yeah, it's just, it's very interesting. And then apparently they're doing a study and then I guess they got more money they want to give out. I don't know. Tell us.
Chairman Pingarelli, Board Member Wiley, thank you for the great questions related to the transportation modernization grant that West-MEC was awarded in, I think it was June that we got notification with the funds becoming available July. And really the intent behind it and the way our application for this grant was submitted was to be able to pilot multiple connection modalities for students to get from either home, charter, their home high school to a West-MEC Central program and back to their home high school, home or charter school, wherever they need to get. So
So
we have-
someone saw that desire and they came up with money to answer that wish.
yes, so there's, depending on who you talk to, they'll give you different motivations behind the original grant opportunity, but in large part, it's, so A for Arizona as an organization, it's a nonprofit organization that was formed in, really backed by the business community to surface best practices across the state and to not necessarily accept status quo for public education and maybe look at things a little bit different. And over time, part of that turned to transportation and how are students going to get, as school choice became more prevalent, it's again, not a choice if you're not able to get to where you're choosing or would like to choose to go. So I had a conversation with Catherine Haley, who's currently vice chair of the State Board of Education. Back in September, October, she had just heard about West-MEC, wanted to learn more about CTE because of her position on the state board. And in touring the Northwest campus with her, she said, what are some of the biggest challenges? What are some of the biggest barriers for students when it comes to career and technical education and West-MEC in particular? And I said, well, a big one is transportation. You know, we try to work with our member districts, but largely our students have to get themselves here. Their parents have to bring them, or when they turn 16, they've got to have a vehicle they have access to get here, or some students Uber, some take the public transportation. And she said, really, you know, there's no funding for CTED transportation. I said, there's not been a mechanism for that. So she told me about this opportunity through A for Arizona, the Transportation Modernization Grant, and said, you know, before you go to, the words of Dr. Pingarelli kind of echoed in my mind when she said this, because she said, before you go and ask for something from the state legislature, you need to make your case. You need to have the data, you need to have what it's going to cost, what it's going to look like, what the plan is going to be. So this particular grant allows us to dabble in that space a little bit. I'm not saying it's going to give us all the answers we're hoping to have, but it allows us to pilot a couple of transportation options for students to be able to access West-MEC Central programs. Again, those four are really cost sharing with member districts. So using existing fleet and existing staff to transport students from their home high school to West-MEC. So one example is with Dysart, they have some activity vans and they can move a small cohort of students back and forth between their high schools and West-MEC. A second is utilizing existing micro-transit options that municipalities operate. So the city of Surprise has the We Ride program that extends to Avondale and Goodyear as well. And that's becoming, I don't know if there was some funding made available for this recently, but it's becoming more popular within municipalities that they offer, they call them micro-transit. So little vans that kind of move you around their region. So utilizing those existing means to move students to our campuses. The third being, and now with Prop 400 going to the ballot, working with Valley Metro as they look west and plan routes and plan public transportation options, that they would engage in that planning with West-MEC in mind. and that we might be able to leverage some of those existing routes in support of moving students to access our programs. And then the fourth is with Hop Skip Drive, which is that kind of Uber for schools, they call it, which they call them care drivers. So their drivers have gone through an extensive background check, their fingerprint clearance card in hand. And it's driven by an app, and that's really of the four modalities, the more expensive of the options. So we don't want to just open it up for everybody to have a ride share. We'd go through the 1.587 million by December. So that's just allows us to explore and research and gather more data so that we can be informed when we're really having this conversation with state legislators.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
my recollection, this was part of money that was put in as part of the budget negotiation. Is that correct or no?
No, that was for, and again, sometimes CTEDs are considered LEAs and sometimes they're not, but that was for existing LEAs who are funded for transportation to pilot opt into it, that other model that was part of the budget negotiation. That legislation did not apply to CTEDs.
Thank you.
So my questions would be, and it's always, I want to make sure we don't have a problem later.
Yep.
What is, and we talked about this, but I just want to put it on the record. We should have a student criteria of who's eligible. And the only reason I say that is this is our student criteria. This is who can get in, who can get out. Nobody can turn around and sue us next year for discrimination. So I would just say, let's have some, I don't care what the criteria is, just that, hey, this is how we measure students. Then the other thing, I look at this grant and it's a 1.5-year grant. Most of our programs are 2 years. So what I would hate to see happen is we get some students that would not go to West-MEC except for this grant. I get you 75% of the way through. So this is, we don't know if we're going to use it all, but I would think it would be in the board's best interest and to say, to encourage students to really take advantage of this who might not come otherwise. It's $500,000 a semester. Could we put in a reserve of $500,000 to the 25 budget in case we use this transportation fund? We have additional money set aside to get these students across the finish line. And so we might not use it,
Or
but
what is the option? Is there an option at the end of that period? December of whatever?
Yeah, so a couple of things in response. Board Member Vice Chair Straka, that when we look at the timeline, it made things difficult for us because and part of it was because of the transition at the executive level. They wanted to make sure that money that had been allocated by the previous administration to help in part fund the transportation modernization efforts wasn't pulled back by the new governor. So they kind of got through that transition period and the money remained. But as a result, the award was a little bit delayed and we got notification in late May, early June. So we weren't able to get ahead of students that were considering applying to programs for the 23-24 school year. So our approach this year for the 23-24 school year is to really just kind of see what surfaces naturally. We've asked our campus counselors and campus administrators to have an ear to the ground for any students that are talking about, I'm struggling to get to my central program, or I'm kind of piecing something together to get there every day, but it's going to be difficult for me to maintain that. And as a result, we've had about 25 or so students that have just kind of naturally surfaced as individuals that would be able to take advantage of a transportation option through West-MEC and through this grant. So right now, that's been the criteria that they present a real barrier. Moving forward, and as part of the enrollment process or application enrollment process for next year, we could certainly build in criteria that they need to demonstrate some type of need for that. We'd have to work. We have a work group that we've developed to really kind of be the thought partners around these efforts. But the second part of the question, we would have a couple of options. One, we could allocate the funds in a way at the beginning of next year that it showed it was committed for the whole year, so we would have access to the full grant amount. Or two, come December of 2024, when in the MOU shows that it ends. I talked with Arizona and their consulting firm that's managing this grant, and they said you could certainly request an extension to get through. If you have funds left, you could certainly request an extension through the end of the school year to continue to have access to those funds.
Can I ask who, I know you said A for Arizona is businesses. What businesses have decided to think outside the box?
This, and I'd have to look specifically, but their history goes back. Goodness, I think I would say at least 20 years, and they were originally kind of an offshoot of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, and then transitioned to their own 501c3 as a nonprofit to help fund innovations. It's not just transportation. This is only one of their avenues, but they support just best practice in public education and how do we replicate that once those things present themselves. And
That's good. I mean, I saw there's a lot of meetings and optional workshops and so, okay.
there's some good accountability there, some good progress reports along the way. And again, for us, we certainly don't believe this is the silver bullet, that this is going to answer all of our problems, but it will allow us some latitude to step into this space that we've talked about for many, many years and see if we can't start moving in the right direction.
Okay, I want to go to some of those meetings. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll open that up and share even the work group. You know, we invite you to be a part of the work group conversations. We've invited other stakeholders from member districts and municipalities to be a part of that too. I think the more minds behind it, the better the result will be.
You know, when I first became a board member, one of the first things I did is I met with our CTE directors, and one of the problems, major problems with some of our students is because they're in Title I schools in my area. And it was a huge problem there are a lot of students that want to come to West-MEC and go to a campus, but they can't. And so that was a major problem. So what criteria are you looking at for which students are you looking to benefit from this?
To date, it's not necessarily been about a specific student demographic and more about what story is told regionally and as member districts. So as we look at Tolleson Union High School is a good example. Proximity, they have the most difficult time accessing one of our central campuses because they sit out, and the same would be true for Wickenburg or Gila Bend or Natterburg that are just physically far away. But Tolleson is larger, so there's more students impacted by that proximity. And we know that the demographics within that community, as we've talked with their previous superintendent, we've got a meeting set up with their new superintendent. We know those students would benefit greatly from having access to West-MEC Central programs and the credentials and skills that come from that. So we have not, again, because it's a pilot and we don't know what we don't know, we didn't want to start too early with limitations. We wanted to see what naturally surfaced, and we wanted this work group to come together to really be able to identify what those priority students might look like and where we should direct those funds towards the beginning. So again, I think we would have been in a little better position if the award was made back in January, but we are where we are, and we've just allowed some of these needs to naturally surface. And going into next year, some of the priority districts that we've looked at are those in Glendale Union, Tolleson, Agua Fria, Buckeye, Gila Bend, Wickenburg, Natterburg, those that we know just proximity wise and their socioeconomic status, population. We know that it's a more significant barrier for those students.
Yeah, well, I know all the satellite schools in my district, they're all Title I schools. So we're looking mainly towards just focusing on like the Tolleson area to begin with.
Not just the Tolleson area. So this year, it's what has surfaced naturally, and that has presented pockets from all over West-MEC's footprint. We've got students, I think, from Wickenburg, we've got students from Anthem and everything in between. So at those 25 or so students that we talked about. Going into next year, this work group, that will be one of the tasks that we have within the work group, really looking at how do we prioritize this funding that still allows us to collect this data and tell the story of access.
And once the funding, once it ends, then what's the next step?
Well, we're hopeful that in the meantime, we'll be able to collect this data and tell the story and talk with really two groups. One is the state legislature to talk about why we think it's a worthwhile investment. We know that's a difficult conversation right now because it presents an ongoing funding need. But at least I'll speak for myself. I believe that investments gets made somewhere. It's either at this level where we're equipping those students with these skills and the programs and the credentials and the opportunities, the dual enrollment credits and all that comes with it, or it's happening post-secondary where those investments become much more expensive. The other is business and industry. You know, we need to talk with some of our industry partners, the employers who need the workforce to start making some investments in this. And what does that look like? And how can they invest to support fees and transportation and credentialing? We've got some, but we could certainly, I think, push on that a little bit more.
And,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
let's see, what was I gonna say? If it was fully funded, how much would it cost?
I don't know. That's a great question. And I think through this, it will allow us to, if we just do it like straight cost share, which is not, the intent of this grant was really to leverage existing systems. They didn't want you to go buy a bunch of buses and vans to move students around. They wanted you to leverage existing systems in support of regionalizing transportation. And I think they would like to replicate this even beyond CTEDs. Like if we could come up with a menu of options that are viable and work, they'd love to see this expand to the comprehensive districts and charter networks and others, to where it's not because you go to a DICERT school, you have to take a DICERT bus. It's more regionalizing student transportation. But I wouldn't even be able to guess right now a dollar amount.
Chairman Bigarelli.
Yes.
We could probably get close. We're different because students come from all around. So for example, you might be in DICERT and you go to the Southwest campus. But I think if we took the total number of students that are on our campuses and we took the per diem rate of whatever that bus would cost to move students from one place to another, we might be able to get kind of close to what it might look like if we move just the total population of West-MEC from their specific region. If they're all in Buckeye, then they would all be at the Southwest campus. We could get close, but it would be our best guess.
Yeah, with the district fleet and those cost share agreements, they've got that down to a science. We could figure out the formula for that modality. But in terms of the micro transit we ride is $1 a leg. The city of Surprise will invoice us $1 to move a student each way. So that's very cost effective. It's being, I think, subsidized on their end. And yeah. And then bus passes, again, those are a cost-effective option, but the routes aren't there to connect and make it a viable option for all of our campuses. And then the ride share is, again, the most expensive of the options because it's moving typically, 1 to 2 students up to 4 students in a vehicle that has a base fare plus mileage. So that gets more costly.
Mr. Garcia.
So on the contract, it says return of unused funds. Is there a way we can not return any of the funds? Just get the funding without returning anything? It says there we have unused funds, we have to turn that back into the grant.
So I'm
Deposit, we're gonna use
Alright.
that.
optimistic that we will put these to use and again, have gotten confirmation from the grant manager that come December 2024, if there's money left, they will let us extend through that second semester.
You didn't answer my question.
I'm sorry. Wait,
If there isn't money left, we've spent 1.5 million and now we're 3/4 of the way through the program. Should we reserve just to make sure everybody knows we're committed to 2 years? And if we don't use the money, fine, it just falls off the books. But I think if I'm a parent sending my kid to something, I want to know that they're gonna get across the finish line. I think the other thing we should really look here is going back to the Title I schools. I think about the Greenway Square in Paradise Valley and that whole area moving south into Shadow Mountain. Very heavy Title I. Those are people that aren't going to college, but a West-MEC program would change their life.
Sure would.
And they would end up in a career that they would have never ended up into. So I think part of the grant we should also, to tell the story to the legislature, is these are kids that wouldn't have gone to college. They are going to be taxpayers making more than minimum wage, making a good wage. And that is also part of this grant and the success story that we don't want to lose track of.
I would certainly not be opposed to having some contingency in place.
Yeah, and that's all it is. It's a contingency reserve fund that if we need it, it's there. If not, it just rolls off. But that's the other reason I wanted to just have a discussion, is I want to make sure we get them across the finish line.
Question is, I understand the concern. I'm just not sure that's an avoidable problem though, because we have students starting at different times, different years, and what if we have this is for 3 semesters, right? That's what I understand, a year and a half. So it'd be this fall. We're in the fall, right? No, we're in the spring. We're in the spring. So it'd be this spring.
Yeah, it's hard to tell in Arizona, but it's.
Yeah. It's a very long summer. So it would be basically this spring. Yeah, no, fall, sorry, yeah, we're fall already, yeah, fall, spring, and then the next.
We would be making a
So-
commitment to those students through the end of the 24-25 school, year,
Correct.
so this year and next. School year.
Yeah,
And with the extension, with the ability to extend through spring of 25, we would be able to fulfill that. 2 years. If we went through the money prior to
Yeah.
that, I think that's where Mr. Straka's contingency comes in, that we would
Yeah.
set aside some funding to make sure that we could fulfill that commitment. And the communication that we would put in place, even going into next year, would be very clear that this is all dependent upon future funding.
exactly, it's just a pilot program, so there's no promise that this will continue on till the end of the program. My question is, who would be managing program, the accounting, the data, doing the data collection and presenting to the board?
So we have this built into the budget of the grant would allow us to contract with Debbie McIntosh, who was previous CTE director in the Tolleson Union High School District. That really has had significant impact, and she knows this barrier for those students well. She's very thoughtful, very innovative, and just a taskmaster. And she has graciously said that she would be willing to champion this work on behalf of West-MEC in her retirement. Some people just have a different idea of retirement than I do, but she, I think, is the perfect person to move this work forward and really pilot this on behalf of West-MEC, working closely with myself, with Marilyn Baviar and our student services team, and April Tyrell to connect with counselors. And it'll be a group effort for sure, but Debbie McIntosh would be our point person on that.
And then we'll be looking at state funding, not federal funding in the future.
Correct.
Good idea.
So, Mr. Straka, are you, sorry, Mr. Fingerly? Are you looking to modify this request, or just as a directive to me to build into the 20?
So I would just add an additional line to the motion that we set aside a reserve fund of 500,000 for spring of 25 out of our excess capital fund, just to have available for this fund if needed. And it would return if it was not needed.
Great. Mr. Williams, can we, with the contract or the grant, are we, I presume we can do that, correct?
We can. We're not obligated to match any funds, but we are certainly allowed to do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we have this item that we need a motion for. Mr. Strucker,
I made the motion as I think, did you capture?
can you restate it, please?
It's just the setting aside.
To create a contingency reserve fund out of existing capital for the spring 25 semester to continue with the grant if needed, if the event is needed. I'm getting a little bit of ribbing from my neighbor here.
Okay,
Did you
There's a motion.
specify $500,000 or just create a contingency reserve fund to?
I
continue
think
the
500,000 because that's 1/3 of the 3 semesters, so we could always adjust as needed, but hopefully it wouldn't be beyond that.
we have a motion by Mr. Strucker. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bosom. I will get you next time, Mr. Garcia. We have a motion and a second.
Quicker.
Yes, unless the two of you want to fight for it. Members, please cast your votes. A motion carries unanimously. Next item is policy manual review and recommended changes. This was the second read, and I believe Ms. Wiley, you pulled this item from consent. Oh, you did. Okay, you did.
So a couple of reasons I did is one is our policy requires second read to be available for discussion, and we can't do that in consent.
Okay.
And so I would just ask the board, has everybody read the entire policy manual that was presented to us? So this is our chance to approve the policy manual. Would it make more sense for us to do 1 or 2 sections a month so that we could really review each section brought to us? So maybe what I would recommend is maybe we pull this for this month, and maybe next month come back and do section A and B. Since we've already done the first read, we would just need to do second read and do 2 sections a month. And that gives enough capacity for us to really review and ask questions. As an example, one of them is, hey, if we don't have 4 people here 15 minutes before the meeting, it can be canceled. We never have a quorum 15 minutes before the meeting. So I think there's a lot of things that we should look at. And if we're going to do that, we may as well clean it up.
What?
So I would say, could we just push this to next month and make it section A and B and take no action this month?
I think when we had the first reads, those were outside of the consent agenda. Is that correct? And this gives board members an entire month to go through all of those policies that were presented, an entire month. So I would agree that on the go forward, we can be more judicious, but some of these policies, you can correct me, are also required for statute. In other words, the legislature has enacted these, and depending on when these bills passed, some of them will go into effect, possibly prior to the next meeting. So I think it's a good suggestion, but in this particular case, I think we should I'm not for tabling it.
Should we just do the 16 policies that are needed for legislative approval instead of the whole policy manual?
Well, to sort those out, we're going to, I don't know how to sort those out. So,
Yes, it should have been in the front of the policy manuals that we sent you for first read.
okay,
Chairman Pingerelli, just a suggestion, could we approve the agenda item this evening and then follow the same process that Mr. Strzok had? Like for the next board meeting, we could, anyone that had issues with policies A and B, you could bring those as first reads as suggestion to make changes, because there's only 16 changes in all the policies. All the rest of them are exactly the same that have been on the books for years.
It's all it's doing is putting right now, the policies say adoption date of manual adoption. It doesn't have it. So ASBA's recommendation is to adopt the whole policy so that now all our policies are adopted as of today's date. And then going forward, then you have adoption date. And then when you go and review them, you can review them.
Because out of all the policies that look, there's only 16 of them. If you want to do policy, then 15 changes, 15 policies. The rest of them are all the same, but we can still look at what Mr. Strzok is talking about. If we want to take a look at policies, if you want to look at making some language changes, that could be done anytime the board wants to do that.
right. I mean, we go through this, and this is traditionally how we have done it. I'm not to say that, you know, the way we've done it is the way we should do it in the future. But traditionally, we go through first reads outside of the consent agenda, and HR or who is appropriate give them. This gives the board a month to review all of those policies, make suggestions, and you know, if they have an issue, they can, you know, pull a item separately. But I again, I prefer, I like Mr. Strzok's idea, but I think I would be more amenable to it on the go forward.
So just as an example, we have one that's the agenda. And on the agenda policy, there's no mention of the approval of the minutes. That has been taken out, but our policy later on says the minutes must be marked as draft until approved by the board. But that policy doesn't have anything stating that where the minutes get approved. So that policy needs to be changed. And that's one of the ones of the 16.
So that policy is the flow of the agenda, and what it's stating is that the approval of the minutes is going to be during the beginning of the meeting. So you're going to call the meeting to order, you're going to do all of this. Whereas common practice is that the meeting minutes are considered part of the consent agenda. And then it's approved with the consent agenda. We're not removing the approval of the meeting minutes. It's just not listed in the flow of the agenda because it will be in the consent agenda items.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve the policy manual review and recommended changes in the second read as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Members, please cast your vote.
Barb, did you cast your vote?
Wrong page.
Okay, motion carries 6-1. So moved. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Next is discussion and possible action to move February and March governing board meeting dates. This should be an easy one. So members,
Well, Dr. Spurgeon asked me to speak. on this.
Actually, is this that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Brown, please proceed.
Dr. Spurgeon asked me to speak on this one. Due to spring breaks, not within just West-MEC, but also within other districts. And vacations and conferences, just administration is recommending to move the February 14th governing meeting to the week before on February 7th. And the March 13th meeting to the meeting before, which would be March 6th.
Members, any issues or discussion?
The only thing I would ask that we not do in those months is not discuss benefit changes or salary changes. Because the headline reads, West-MEC moves board meeting and approves raises and new benefits. That doesn't play well with the public, so I would say we do it in April or something.
And that I agree with. So,
I'm getting a lot of agreement.
yeah, you're getting a lot of agreement. So, if, I don't think we need to add to that motion. That's just a discussion. But, I will need a motion and a second, please.
A motion that we move the dates as recommended by the board, by the administration, I mean.
I would second that.
Okay. We have a motion, and a second. Members, please cast your votes. Welcome. Thank you. Next item, let me just read the item for the public, is discussion and possible action to approve a nursing program coordinator stipend. Thank you. Please proceed.
The primary purpose of this particular stipend is to cover the duties of the vacant position of nursing program coordinator at the Northwest campus. The position was vacant for an entire year, but those duties still have to be covered. And so the campus administrator has identified a nursing instructor that will be able to carry on those duties in the absence of filling that position. And so the stipend before you is to cover those additional duties that that particular instructor could be fulfilling.
And would we stop looking for the other position?
The position is still vacant. And if they are lucky enough to find a candidate, then we will prorate the stipend to cover the time that the instructor has done the work. And then we would just discontinue the stipend and hire the instructor, the coordinator.
Mr. Garcia.
Sure, so, with this, I don't know, your picture, so it's the coordinators, for the program, is it the instructor that's gonna have a dual role, or is it gonna be an office staff member that's gonna have a dual?
No, my understanding, and Holly Medina is here, she could provide more additional information. However, the goal of the position was to supervise and evaluate the nursing assistant program. And so the instructor will still have her instructional duties, but she will be assisting in that particular role of supervising and evaluating.
How does she evaluate and supervise herself?
Well, she'll still be evaluated by her campus administrator.
Just to put a little bit of background on it, the State Board of Nursing requires a program coordinator in order to stay in compliance with the rules and regulations in order for that to happen. That requires an additional training that goes along with it. And in order to keep the program open, you have to have both levels. So staying in compliance and evaluating of it, that's evaluating of our clinical sites and making sure they're meeting the requirements for our students to be there, as well as having the proper staff, which includes our nursing skills trainers that come in for the clinical sites for that supervision. So she can do a dual role. Our last nursing instructor did the same thing until she left, but it's a lot of work. And not being able to find it, if you don't have a program coordinator, then the program won't close down.
Not in compliance.
I have a question or two questions, I guess. How do we come up with a $5,000 amount and how is it gonna be paid out? Is it gonna be paid out like hourly as if this person is doing hourly work, I guess?
So what happens with the extra duty pay stipends is the amount is spread, once it's approved, it's spread over the employee's remaining pays for the year in equal payments each pay period. And so they may get an additional, I don't know, $75, $100, $200 per pay period in order to do that additional work. And so, as I said before, if the work is no longer needed or they do find someone for the position, we just back out the rest of the remaining case for the year.
How was the $5,000 stipend?
That was recommended based on the duties that are required. Thank you for the line. The duties that this individual will be covering in terms of program evaluation, supervising staff, supervising, basically being a program manager, as you mentioned. And we thought that that would be a fair amount based on the duties that they will be covering.
How much additional work will it be from them being an instructor and doing his additional, how many more hours are they really gonna have to put in?
That's a great question. And I'm gonna ask Sally to answer that because she will be more familiar with the schedule.
It's dependent on the number of clinical sites. So it could, in the hours will ebb and flow throughout the year. So the beginning of the year, she's already doing the job because we have to stay open. So it's just turning around and doing compensation. So we're turning in reports to the State Board of Nursing can be additional hours, as well as finding the clinical sites and making sure the agreements are correct with those sites. Supervision, evaluations, reports that are turned in. It can be a couple of 100 hours, as well as testing at the end of the school year. Be part of it.
So, thank you. I have a question too. So I understand we need to have this to stay in compliance. Is the state nursing board, do they know the entirety of our situation? In other words, what we are doing here today with having someone adopt these additional hours and stipending them for it is the licensing board, the nursing licensing board. Are they on board with this or do they know?
They know.
They know.
We have to submit that in order to keep our programs open as to who our program coordinator is, as well as our instructor.
So
And
they,
there's an application process for that too, because they have to verify the credentials of that person in order to be in that position.
and so the nursing board understands that this employee is taking on these additional responsibilities. Okay, thank you.
So I just want to be clear, these are not part of her regular duties. She has volunteered because there was a vacancy. And we are now going to compensate her and add these additional duties to her salary
Until we get somebody.
until we get somebody else.
It's,
That is all correct. Correct,
It
okay,
actually does not go into her base. It is a separate line.
right. No, because we cannot just add 5,000 even as a stipend or it's gift of public funds. It's additional duties that she doesn't currently have.
That is correct.
And, okay, I just want to make sure we're crossing the Ts and dotting the Is the right way.
And then you said that the person before, we're also doing the double duties for about a year. 2 years. Prior to the 2 years. So why not make this just a permanent?
That was one of the reasons our instructor had left. Because of the additional duties that were added on top, to keep the program going. And we were doing an hourly timesheet with her to add those, the time that she was having to deal with it. That was one of the reasons she walked off. So having that ability to just add, that's the reason why we approached the attitude of trying to find a program coordinator to take those duties off, as well as support our member districts. Because they are wells having the problems keeping a program coordinator to run those duties and compliance, as well as keeping an instructor. It's too much. So, yeah, adding it on top and asking them to do it for forever and for free, it's a lot of additional work.
So we are intending to find someone to fill that position.
In hopes, yes.
Mr. Garcia.
What efforts have we taken to actually place that position? Do we know why? The last person, do we know why we can't find anybody? Is there anything we can do that we're not doing to get someone in that position?
Program coordinator for a CNA nursing program requires a certain number of years of working in a long-term care facility with elderly. That's not a common position. They're also pulled out of the clinical setting. You make more money working bedside than you do as an instructor.
Would this be a full-time position or part-time?
What we are looking for is a full-time position, yes, but it also help with all of our member districts. So in the past, it'll be help like with Awafria as well as Dysart, Deer Valley, all the other nursing programs that fall within our district are having the same struggles of finding a program coordinator. So this will allow us to reach out into those areas and help them as well to keep our nursing programs going, which are very hard to keep staffed and moving forward.
But but the demand for the students is extensive.
Yes, nursing, there's a high demand for
Can I
nursing.
make a motion?
Please.
Please.
I want to approve this stipend, thank you.
As presented. And I will second the motion.
I think it's that you can find a part-time person and they.
West-MEC. I would say that's acceptable.
Okay, further discussion. Well, we have a voting item. now. So members, please cast your vote. Okay, next on the agenda is recommendation for approval of the superintendent's 2023-2024 goals and evaluation plan. Dr. Spurgeon.
Thank you, Chairman Pingarelli. I don't know, you gonna put that up on the screen? Everybody probably has it on their laptop as well. So goal number one, if you remember when I first came on board, this number was 78%. We set a 5% increase goal at 83 last year. And that was based off of the benchmark district of Francis Tuttle out of Oklahoma City and also Great Oaks out of Ohio. So last year's goal was 83%. This year's goal, we moved it up another 5 points to 88%. So that's one performance goal of our students achieving that high value credential, which means it's a credential that's required for the student to be able to participate in that career pathway. It's not something that you would love to have, nice to have. It's those required credentials for students to go into that pathway and be successful, identified by business industry. The second goal is 90%. This is a brand new one. And you're going to see this one every single year. We're not going to take this one down. We want to see 90% of our students pass the Arizona Department of Education technical skills assessments. And that's the year-end test. And again, each time you pass that test, you complete a credential, you complete a program, all that reflects back on the increase in the A3F accountability system for our member districts. So 90% is going to continue to be a goal. And if we see good work right there, that could be a goal that can go up a little bit, but 90% is going to be our initial goal for this 23-24 school year. Goal number 3 is also brand new. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But we want 90% of our students to come out in the spring to have completed a full career literacy pathway plan when they leave us in the spring moving forward. And I'll show you that just a little bit later as we move forward. Let's go to the next screen. At the request of Mr. Straka, remember you talked earlier in the year that you would like to see this as a part of one of my goals to get the benefits done. So I added that as a part of my goal number 4. To go out for an RFP for West-MEC benefits, to bring the recommendation back to the governing board, whether that's to modify, change our current plan, recommend a new plan, or to stay with our current plan. So that was a recommendation, Mr. Straka, that I took from you. And then the 5th goal is obviously going to be one that you'll probably see every single year, and that's to maintain our financial stability and financial accountability to our stakeholders. let me move to the career literacy piece. This is something that if you've been in one of my presentations, you've seen. If you haven't been in one of my presentations, you haven't seen this. So go to the next screen. Do you mind if I stand? Okay. So if you've been in any of our programs, you'll notice that Mark Perna's work around the career literacy trees is identified in every single one of our 29 and duplicated programs. And this is really done it's all about the career literacy piece. So for an example, if I'm a student at West-MEC, these are just some example types of jobs that if I come out of West-MEC and all I do is get my credential, these are types of jobs that a student can go into right now and go to work. There's more than what's listed here. But if I'm a student, I want to choose to go into post-secondary studies, I can go into the technical side of the careers, which opens up a whole new doors of opportunity for higher jobs, higher paying jobs, more advanced jobs. If I want to go even further, you go up here on the far right, it's that advanced four-year degree or advanced technical degree where students can open up a whole new door of opportunities for a student to go into career pathways. My vision around this is when I first came to West-MEC, one of the things that I found very clear is we need parents to be able to see the end from the beginning. So for an example, when a student decides they want to apply for a specific program at West-MEC, where's that program going to lead them in the final analysis? So this career literacy 2.0 piece says this. My child is going to be able to see if they choose to come out of West-MEC and go right into the world of work. We're going to show them exactly who's hiring in that career field in the geographic footprint in which that student resides. But they're going to come right, this plan is going to identify that. If they choose to go into a post-secondary pathway, we'll get into that in just a second. It will outline all of our post-secondary pathways that show a student when they come out of the automotive program. It will show you all the lines of articulation from that program into 2-year, 4-year technical schools that child can make those decisions. So again, we're about a faster way forward. So the more information we get at the beginning, the better decision you can make for that child and not make poor decisions or take wrong turns, which just costs more money and we lose time. You go to the next section. So in October, you're going to see these little orange signs that'll be right outside of each of the career trees. You'll be able to click on a QR code, and these are just examples of some of the things that you're going to be able to see. So if I'm walking somewhere around through our buildings, we're going to be able to take those visitors or those parents, they'll be able to click on, I want to know more about the welding program. You're going to click on that QR code, and this whole batch of information is going to be able to come up right at their fingertips, be able to say, these are things that I want to know about the welding program. And it's going to be on all 29 of our unduplicated programs from there. You can go next one. And this is what a career pathway plan is suggested to look like. So for an example, when you see, it'll show you what they've chosen as a career path. It will show you what they're going to be making potentially an hour or their salary wage. It's going to show you what credentials or how many hours they're going to have sit time and pass the certification to be able to work in that career field. The fourth pillar, which is not listed there, is the post-secondary pathway. So if I choose to move on from West-MEC and continue my education, what pathways exist? And then lastly, you'll be able to click on this. This plan will show you what companies in West Phoenix or in that geographic region are actually hiring aviation mechanics right now when you come out of West-MEC.
That's fabulous.
So that's going to come out in April. So again, that's what that goal looks like is 90% of our students in the spring will come out with a produced career pathway plan. So go ahead and go to the next one. And this is something that you might want to study because Speranta and Marilyn Babiar put this together. And sometimes complex information over multiple pages is hard to understand. So we got all of it in one single page. These are all of our articulated programs that give students the ability to get college credits and all of our programs and where do they get them. So the first piece talks about all of our dual enrollment credits with Maricopa County and Yavapai. It shows you all the programs that are articulated. It shows the programs that are our concurrent programs. So for example, our EMT, Fire Science, and our Culinary Arts program, and also our Aviation Maintenance, where they are articulated and what kind of credits are available to our kids. Next big piece is the articulated agreements. We have the Pima Medical and UTI that Mr. Williams talked about earlier. And the brand new piece, or a fairly new piece, is the PLA, the Prior Learning Assessments. And we think this is going to be explosive. Let me give an example of what that means. If I'm a welding student and I finish our welding program, Maricopa County will give that student, let's say, gives them 17 credits in the welding field. So if I'm a trainer and I got 17 credits behind me, if I walk into Maricopa County and I go into a welding program to continue my education, all 17 of those train rails follow right with me. If I choose to go into the business side, I lose all of the train. So that this allows them to articulate those prior learning assessments and give credit when students complete our programs in career and technical education. So that's going to be our fourth pillar. And you're going to see this come out and all this is going to be linked together. It's going to continue to be an ever-changing piece of work, a work of art is what I called it. But this will give parents a really, really clear picture, the best that we can give them about when I make this decision, what avenues, what results, where does it actually going to lead my child? So that's a little bit, there's a lot more to that, but that's kind of the simplistic version of what that new career literacy piece is gonna look like. With that being said, you see my 5 goals, and then my evaluation piece, I had Ms. Brown pull the evaluations from all the CTEDs from across Arizona. And we put this together from what the CTEDs had done with their superintendents. And so what you see in front of you is a compilation of the work that we pulled from the other CTEDs, superintendent evaluations. And we think this matches policy, and we think this sets some good areas, some great areas to evaluate, and areas in which I can write to and provide a narrative and evidence and documentation of good work that we do here in West-MEC. So with that being said, I stand for questions. Yes, sir.
Yes.
So on the career literacy tree, I was reviewing some of the data, information from the other drafts. But I don't see, so here's a little bit of inside baseball with me. Over the weekend, Sunday, I dropped my son off at the Marine Corps recruiting office to ship out to Marine Corps boot camp. And he's a West-MEC student. He was joined with 3 other West-MEC students. One was going into, he was communications guy, which he learned electronics, I think from West-MEC. My son was a medical student, so he was a medical student. So on our tree, we don't really show any carryover or crossover to the military occupations or the careers with officers or enlisted, or what does it take to grow in that career as well. I would love to see that. In that role, so there's 18,000 young people go to the military out of Arizona alone every year, 18,000. And I think we missed the mark when we totally put them into academia in our immediate place, because it serves our communities and it serves our state, but it doesn't really serve the student, because that is an option that's out there that we're just excluding totally off the table, which 18,000 kids a year. I think that it's a viable option.
I'm good with that. I think that's an absolute fantastic idea, because the opportunities that they have in the military sometimes supersede the opportunities you have in the civilian world. And so we probably will need your expertise in developing some of those lines of articulation and what those may lead to, because that's an ever-changing world. But then we know there's some standardization around some of the basic military options that are available, at least to start.
And of those 3, I know 2 of them got, because of the credits that they received from the school, they got to go in with a higher rank. And so that was a benefit, a cost benefit, a rank benefit, and a pay benefit. Gives them more leadership wherever they're going from the get-go. Awesome way to start off.
And I think these 5 goals, I think, Mr. Strock, I believe last year, I have to have a performance goal. So a couple of them are performance.
Yeah. So
So
which one is number 2, the testing that we have to have? And what was it last year?
We're probably at 90 or 91, remember, different kids.
I mean, what was the goal for last year?
It's brand new.
So because we have one testing goal that we always have to increase every year, and I just want to make sure that we have that testing goal on here, because what was the testing goal?
But I didn't have one last year. The only performance one I had last year was the credentials.
But we should have had one for testing, because that's like the state, there's a state requirement, we have to have one for testing, so.
But it's on here now.
Okay. Do all of our programs have a state assessment?
I don't think they all do. They do. I think there's still a couple, 2 or 3 that do not.
So what is how do we? So 90, what I'm worried about is 90%, but if there's a couple of, what about those programs? What's our benchmark for those programs that don't have state assessments?
So what we do is, you can receive if you want to, but what we do is we actually have local assessments. So built into the 301 plan, it's AD assessments and local assessments that are combined in that number in order to qualify for the 301 money. So we would have to use the local data assessments, which in fact, what's really interesting is our local assessments are much harder, much more complex than the state assessments are itself. So we would have to fall back on those local assessments in those 2 or 3 or handful of programs that we have that did not have a TSA.
Chairperson Struck, Governing Board Member Struck, Superintendent, Dr. Spurgeon is absolutely correct. Last year, the requirement is to have student achievement. There has to be a student achievement indicator in the superintendent's goals. Last year, the superintendent and the board used the industry credential. that being, for West-MEC, that really is the truest achievement for a student is to earn the industry credential. And that was the one that was used last year, which has increased this year. In addition, this year he has added the student achievement for the technical state assessment. And in those few programs that don't have a technical state assessment, we can use the industry credential or our program assessment.
I would say if we're gonna use industry credential on one, we shouldn't use that on two. It starts to. So can you help me understand, like, what's a high value industry credential versus a regular industry credential? Is it just one? Is it like I have to get 6 to be high value? What? Help me understand.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Depends on the program. So for us, something like automotives, for instance. In the automotives program, there are a number of credentials. High value credentials are those credentials that are either required for employment or give you a leg up for employment. So in the automotive industry, something like an ASE student certification in suspension, steering or brakes, that is required for employment. So that would be high value. Through our program, students also get credentials in something like measurement. So snap-on measurement, which is a great tool and it definitely adds value, but it's not something that's going to give them a leg up necessarily for hiring, or it's not required for hiring. So that would be an industry credential, but it's not one of the high value industry credentials. So our teachers have worked with advisory councils to really go through and label all the credentials, and our advisory or industry partners, they have signed off on those that are truly high value.
And I do know for a fact that whatever's in my superintendent goals, everything aligns from top to bottom.
What I would like, because we always talk about a lot about credentials and just the way my writing works or whatever. I always think it's a one-to-one and it clearly isn't. It would be really helpful to know, hey, we have 29 programs. How many can because some program students can only earn one credential. And you gotta hit that one to get to 90%.
Right.
But the ones that they can earn 10, or how many can they earn? How many are they earning? Because I think it would be really helpful to know going forward, hey, they earned, like FAA, I think it's 6. If they earn all 6, they're well on their way, but they have to earn all 6 really to get a job. So if there is some way, I'm not sure it belongs in this goal, but if there's some way for us to better understand how prepared our students are, if that makes sense.
It'd be great for me to know as well, because it's all singleton. So you can go on the website, it'll show you the certifications that are available, but we don't have anything that I've seen. Maybe Stephen does. We can put that together in a very simplistic piece to show you each program, preferred credential or required credentials, and then how many total credentials are available in that program.
Right.
We can do that.
Suspension is nice, but how many do I really need to get a job?
Right.
And it might be a selection and say, hey, I've gotten 6 of.
Yeah, we can do that. That'd be good to know.
Good idea.
Be great to know.
Because we've talked about this a
Doesn't
lot.
hurt to
So
know they're available too,
Yeah.
for the students to see them.
And each individual industry actually knows the answer to that question, but collectively, it'd be good to have that one spot, just like the articulation agreements with our college credit, with our colleges and our current enrollment. So.
And the only other goal, and it might be too early to talk about, but I'd really like to start to understand our utilization and classroom capacity as we start to think about a bond 4 or 5 years out. We need to know how full we are. Do we have room for more? I don't know if that's a goal here or is that something for next year, but that's, I think, the only thing, and maybe I'm thinking too far out. What would your thoughts be on
No,
something like that?
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I talked to each of the individual groups about, I think all 5 of them actually, if you count Start and corporate together. But I've been approached by at least one person. I think there's others that are interested in what K-12 comprehensive school districts call their 6/5 teaching during their planning time. So for an example, Paul Getz approached me and said, Doc, I'd really like to offer the Amazon Web Services that offers 4 additional certifications during that time period where students aren't in the building. So we're looking to expand those open opportunities, but we'll also have to look for a 6/5 opportunity to be able to pay for that, them being able to offer that. But the cost itself of what it will be to pay somebody would definitely be reimbursed by the number of students in those programs. So that's one big thing that we're looking at going into this year is what does that look like for us as a sixth fifth to be able to open up that space? Because what's happening is more districts are allowing their students to be out with us more. Whereas maybe 3 or 4 years ago was pretty tight because you're worried about the funding for the students being back at the 1.0 for 4 hours. So I think they're starting to become more flexible. And the districts that are growing in enrollment are less concerned about the students being back for that 4 hours than ones that might be losing students. So that's one idea to try to cover some of that open space that students want to do.
Could they also maybe be on campus 3 hours, but the 4th hour is online with the school?
We've talked about that as well. Our cabinet have talked about that, especially for seniors. To meet that requirement, because they'll have to be on campus for half a day. But if there's some online options for a student, could we keep them longer? Could they take 2 consecutive programs, do something online to fulfill the requirement back at the homeschool? So there's some other options for us to take a look at.
Is that a goal for next year is what you're saying, or is that?
Depends on how it goes with kind of the 6/5. It's going to be kind of a
So it's
part
not
of what that,
Yeah.
not for this year, but looking forward, I think that there could be some open opportunities. Because the issue is now that we have transportation funding, we only have so many spots. And so until we start moving dirt, adding programs or looking for extra time and space, we're going out selling people goods that we can't deliver on. It will increase the number of applications that are probably eligible applications for students to come to West-MEC. And it may change the demographic or who applies for the spots available. So we know that's going to change with transportation, but until we have more spots, I could have 20,000 applications. We're still only going to bring in 1,900 kids. So that's why it's extremely important for us to get these projects off and rolling and get the bond issue pieces moving and rolling. We gotta move some dirt. That's what I always call it. We gotta move some dirt and open some programs.
So Dr. Spurgeon, thank you. So I just overall, I generally like goals that are, when you have a number of goals, they're relatively straightforward, they're medium difficulty, and then there are the so-called stretch goals. How would you categorize all of your goals? And what do you see as the most difficult, or 1 or 2 most difficult, so the board can say, well, okay, that's pretty tough, because we don't want to make it too easy, right? That's our job.
I would say probably the 2 performance goals, because we don't have human beings make their own choices. And it's really all dependent upon the classroom teachers, the delivery of the teachers, the students being there every single day. So the more difficult goals are the ones that have more variables which we can't control.
Okay.
And so those 2 goals in and of itself don't necessarily compare the same group of kids 2 years in a row. So it's a whole different group of kids coming in with a different level, different developmental levels, just like if you had a new kindergarten group coming in every year, that group's completely different than the kindergarten students last year. So depending on where they come in developmentally, the teacher still knows they have to get them to this point in time with this level of skill set to be successful in passing the TSA. So those two performance are the ones that are always most challenging, because there's too many uncontrolled variables that we can't do anything about. We can't control whether they come to school every day. We can't control if they do their homework. We can't control if they do their workplace learning. We can't control if they give their best efforts on those assessments. So those are always a point of stress for me. But I think by having those goals here, it aligns all of the goals from to the tactical goals to the teacher 301 plans. Everything is aligned, so we're all pulling the same rope, moving in the same direction. So I'm not scared of performance goals at all. I'm not scared of really much performance ever. Because I think if you set the goal in itself, you articulate your vision from top to bottom and from bottom up, you give people the resources, the training to get things done, then you can sleep well at night.
Okay. Let me try to create a nexus. There's something earlier that Mr. Ramirez mentioned on the Taiwanese manufacturing semiconductor plant, and the article, which I recall was published maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And the real we don't know where all the quotes come from and so on, but one of the things that they commented on is why they're delaying the implementation of full manufacturing, and I presume they're doing 4 nanometer chips, is that American workers don't work hard enough. So let me try to create a nexus here. And I agree with you on the, you can't control that. Is West-MEC doing enough to install the work ethic in the in its students. And I would tend to say yes, but is there anything else we could do? And, you know, or do you disagree with the comment that was in that article?
No, I agree. From a West-MEC perspective, I believe we're getting students prepared for the workforce. I can't say 100%. 100% of anything is probably difficult to say in anything in life. But here's a perfect example that answers your question or gets to the point of your question. There are a number of fast track programs and boot camps that Maricopa County and other organizations have offered to prepare the workforce for TSMC. Their retention rate's about 50% of those students that are coming out into TSM through the boot camps. We had, I think, 6 or 7 students that went to Taiwan for training 2 summers ago. And to date, all 100% of those students still work for TSMC.
Okay.
And that would be my question. Can we do more? I would take the gentlemen that talked about more work-based learning and real world experience instead of being always behind in a classroom, because you get out there and you learn what it's like in the real manufacturing or IT environment, because that's when things get tough. You see real challenges and you have to deal with real people and real relationships and somebody not feeling great one day. So I think I'll take the advice of the 2 students and for us to better prepare the students for what coming out of West-MEC, and that's to get them into real world environment more often than we do now. And we do a great deal of it now. So I think there's better.
Isn't the biggest challenge, the insurance on putting them out in industry?
Well, they're out all the time. They're out for job shadows, internships, work-based learning. That's a required component of our programs now. But I think when one of the gentlemen said it would be nice if the business environment was in our environment.
That's right, come into the classroom.
And so I think when we look at the partnership principles that Mr. Williams and I have put together for this past year, I think maybe that starts to become more of a conversation of how can you become a part of our space? Because we have the best facilities I've ever seen in any place I've ever been. And we utilize those with our high school students and our adult learners. What does that space look like now? If we get business and industry to be able to set up shop and be able to perform business from our spaces. So I think we can do a better job of that, because the only way kids get better doing something is doing that thing.
Members, other comments, questions on Dr. Spurgeon goals and evaluation instrument?
So one more thought. Our professional development. Have we ever thought about turning it into a profit center as a subscription model? There's a lot of small districts in Arizona and frankly across the country that need professional development. If we recorded our classes on Zoom and gave people a subscription fee, we could provide professional development for a lot of CTE teachers, not just in Arizona, but really across the country, because that is a missing segment for a lot of teachers.
Mr. Wakefield, have you discussed that in the past? Since just been a year. I don't want to misspeak and not say that we haven't done that, because I would imagine as sharp as your team is, you probably had those discussions.
Yes, thank you for the question, and I appreciate the insight. One of the things that when I come in October, I'll talk about is the subscription or the membership option that we've offered to our member districts and what that looks like. So we do have a membership. We have done some work during COVID when we were online with even some international students, and we're working through some of those things. But yes, those are all things that we're working at with some distance learning opportunities, providing some of our trainings online. Fresh back from the pandemic, people valued being in person, so we really worked on that. But we know that an online option is something that others are really asking for. So thank you for the question, and we'll be continuing to explore that.
When we were at the Teachers Leadership Institute down in Tucson, this is the first time CTE has ever been involved with presenting some proposals for the teachers themselves. And I heard from at least 2 counselors there that said, you don't realize how valuable West-MEC is to us, because without your training, we couldn't do what we do. So I know we do some of that now, but not in the format in which you're talking, which we could actually provide. You'd have to have folks that are willing to be videotaped. Yeah, that's always the hurdle that you'll have to overcome.
And you just tell people, hey, this is going to be videotaped, blah, blah, blah. But I think about like school districts in the Navajo County.
Right.
They don't have any form, I doubt, and for them to come to Phoenix, it becomes cost prohibitive. And so I think then you start to go out to Montana and other places. And I think there's opportunities to help teachers, and that just builds our name.
Mr. Straka, if I could talk a little bit about Pinion, the Navajo County Chinle. There are a couple options that they currently have with professional development. The state association has a person in place and has the process in place for training to occur with them. So they do have some of those opportunities. But also, as Dr. Spurgeon mentioned, people value the West-MEC professional development, and we have extended a membership to Pinion, which is a district up in the northern Arizona, primarily Navajo reservation. And they come down for trainings. They'll spend a day to travel, a day to attend, and then a day to travel. So to take one training costs them 3 days of school. And that just is an example of how much they value the training that goes on here at West-MEC. So thank you.
Good food for thought. They could save 2 days.
This is like a question, just want to clarify on the goal number 1, high value industry credentials. So my understanding is those high value industry credentials are those that are either required or that give you a leg up. Does that mean you come in at a higher entry level, like position level 2, or like a instant promotion?
As a person with.
Is that what that means?
Another level of skill.
Absolutely, Governing Board Member Ramirez. Yeah, yes, for every industry is a little bit different, but in some industries, it not only moves your resume up to the top of the stack, but it also brings you in at a higher differential pay. Okay, like when Mr. Garcia was talking about the military, which was absolutely correct. Many of our students, diesel is a great example. When students earn the right ASE certificates in our diesel program, they can go into the military at a higher grade and higher pay. The same is true for some industries too.
I would like to add that just bear in mind that the credentials are industry driven. So it's actually industry telling them what they want in a program when they're making those agreements. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Pingerelli, you were asking earlier about, you didn't say what keeps me up at nighttime, but many of our credentials are offered through third-party vendors and not West-MEC. And those standards and those assessments are set by someone other than that's outside of our organization. And we have no control over that. So that makes them, I think, more reliable, valid, and challenging.
Thanks.
Okay. We need to move forward. This is an action item. Someone like to make a motion?
So we'll make a motion.
Guarino and Mr. Garcia, finally you got the second. Okay. If there's no further discussion, members, please cast your vote.
And while you're voting, sorry, Chairman Pingerelli, if I might have the floor just for a second. So if you look at all credentials, it's about between 98 and 99% of our students get credentials. And so that's all credentials. These are only the ones that are required or put you at the top of the stack for, whether that's coming in the military or other opportunities.
We still in the agenda item?
Yeah, but my thing closed down, so I put my path
Oh,
back in.
okay, so it didn't come up. Just give me a verbal yes or abstain.
Yeah, mine keeps shutting down. I have to keep putting in my password. Yes.
I had that problem too, but I hadn't fixed it before the meeting.
So thank you, everyone. Motion carries unanimously. Next item, under action, final item under action is appointment of and instruction to the official delegate and alternative regarding the board's direction in voting at the ASBA, Arizona School Boards Association, Delegate Assembly. So this is
Mr. Chairman, could I just recommend we move on? We have this discussion every year. And let's save some time, and I don't think if anyone's interested in being a delegate, otherwise let's just move on.
Well, let me ask, there are new members, is anyone interested? Mr. Garcia, are you sure? So, okay, so,
It's
if,
like a root canal without any.
and I think we've had this discussion for 6 years and come to the same conclusion, Mr. Miguelino and I and others know this, so, if there's no objection, we will just move on. Okay, with no action. So now we are in the final stages of our meeting. We have, first, under information discussion, information, on foster youth.
Good evening,
Thank you.
Chairman Pingerelli, Superintendent Spurgeon, members of the board. I'm Marilyn Baviar with my colleague Shelley Tom tonight to talk about foster youth. So thank you, Governing Board Member Garcia, for asking for this presentation about how West-MEC supports foster youth. We know that this board has a passion for advancing student support, and we're happy to share how we're supporting them. As you may recall, this past spring, a new policy came before the board requiring staff training for foster youth. And that did happen at each campus this July by our campus administration and our campus counselors. If you have not met my colleague and Director of Exceptional Student Services, Shelley Tom, she's going to proceed on the next few slides and I'll have her introduce herself.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here today to be able to talk about one more way we're taking care of all of our students at West-MEC. So I'm the Director of Exceptional Student Services, big title, but the biggest thought process is intervention systems. So building systems of support so that all students have the access to everything we do here at West-MEC. So if we could go to the next slide, we'll go ahead and, are we doing it or are you guys doing it back? Okay. Now if we can get it to decide to do it. Oop, we went too far. Okay, it's not being nice. Let's go back one. Okay, so just in kind of a brief format, there are some legal requirements around foster youth now with our board policy. And really our foster youth are individuals that are in the care of others 24/7 because they are not in the care of their guardians or parents any longer. And that our child welfare agency here in Arizona Department of Child Safety is responsible for that care and placement. So what that can look like can be in a foster setting with other family members, maybe their grandparents, aunts, uncles might be helping raise them instead of their guardians. They could be in foster care settings, group homes, and other types of placements in that area. Part of the reason that this became a focus for board guidelines is because of a change in what's called the ESSA, so that Every Student Succeeds Act, which is a legislative piece a while ago that talked about how we support all different kinds of populations of students to make sure that they have the same educational opportunities as every other student. In that change in legislation in ESSA, they moved foster youth awaiting placement out of the homeless area of McKinney-Vento and kind of made them their own population, giving us a chance to spotlight the unique needs of this population. And so under this new rule, it helps make sure that we're monitoring them for having stability of their school placement, make graduation rates, and be able to report those kind of achievements that we're going to see. Just kind of for reference though, the difference part that you see here in blue is that they're no longer part of McKinney-Vento, which is homeless youth. And they're individuals that are facing housing insecurity. So they now say, we've got a foster placement for you, don't really have housing insecurity anymore. It's more stable than if you were in the Homelessness Act. And so what we can see over the year though, is that the placement rates for our students in foster stays pretty consistent throughout the year. They usually send in their statements, placements a little bit longer than someone that might be in the homeless situation. So that's kind of our big difference between those two areas. Kind of to note for West-MEC is we do not receive federal monies for McKinney-Vento. And even though homeless youth is not our focus today, when we're breaking off our foster into a different place, just wanted to mention that we don't receive funding for that. But what we've done is build amazing relationships with our member districts, because they do have McKinney-Vento and we share those students with them. So we collaborate with our counselors and other individuals at the member districts to be able to provide supports for all of our students. And then we've also built a partnership with Homeless Youth Connections to be able to provide additional services and supports, and they can come directly here to our campuses and support our students that are facing housing insecurity. So not the same population, but related, that we want to make sure you know that we are taking care of them as well. And then just under these guidelines, every district has some responsibilities that fall into here. There are about 14,000 youth in Arizona that are considered foster placement. 40% of that is in the high schools. And so it's an issue we need to look at. And so they're just saying, here's some responsibilities we have. First and foremost is identify someone that the community can reach out to and know who's here to support that, make sure the individuals are moving forward. And I've been listed with the state to be that support person. But then we also need to train our staffs annually in what it is to be foster youth and how we can support them. And Marilyn already addressed, we have taken care of that in all of our campuses. And we've gotten feedback from every campus that those presentations went well with our staff, well received, no concerns in that area. And then how do we identify individuals with foster youth and monitor their progress? And so we've been very fortunate with our student information system to be able to collaborate with everyone in our departments to make sure that there's a way to identify individuals as they're enrolling. They can self-identify and let us know immediately they're in foster care, or through the great work of our counselors on our campuses and our administrative assistants looking at incoming paperwork for guardianship and birth certificates and different things of that nature to be able to identify. So we can pull reports anytime we want to see if we have more students we need to be focusing on and following that achievement performance. So we've got great support of everyone to make sure we're taking care of our students in that way. And if needed, to be able to coordinate with our state welfare agency to make sure transportation is not a barrier to participating. And now we've got that great grant to help with that. Let Marilyn jump in on some of these great areas.
Thank you. So I know that you've had this presentation for a little while. Hopefully you've read, there's a lot of words in our recruitment and retention box, but we wanted to let you really see and know, and you've probably heard a lot about this before, about how we have counselor advisories, how we have these relationships with our member districts, what we're doing in the retention of ongoing communications and monitoring on our campuses. You get that weaving throughout, but I wanted to let you know that currently we have 2 foster youth that have registered for our programs this year. And, you know, I wanted to talk just a little bit about like possible barriers, like if we're seeing that there's 14,000 in the state and West-MEC has 2, what are these barriers? And earlier today, we were talking about students, and Stephen was talking about the fact that they not only have to go to their member districts, but then they have to get to West-MEC. So as CJ shared information about transportation, it's a huge barrier for lots of students. We also know that barriers are that these students might be outside of our boundaries, but coming to us, that they have increased absences because of the things that they have to go to, the meetings they have to go to. Just, there's a million reasons why they would have absences. And we do have this fair and equitable rubric because it's a blind application when kids come to us. So we're just looking at that right student for the right program, which I know I've presented on numerous occasions to you, and you can see how it's stretched by the numbers that you heard from Paradise Honors today and the numbers that you hear about not homeless youth, homeschool students, as well as our member districts, and how we make sure that students all across our member districts are getting those fair and equal spots. And that really is some of the reasons why maybe there are not a bigger percentage of students, but again, we don't know who those students are. And that's really just something we want to like drive home, is that until they get a spot, we don't know if they're on an IEP, if they're on a 504, if they're homeless, if they're foster youth. We're not choosing students for one reason or another. Other barriers could be cost. Maybe they didn't submit an application. Maybe their rubric score was a little bit lower. Maybe they didn't meet application requirements because they didn't get a C or higher in English or don't have that. So we know that those students, I have this colleague here that there isn't anyone in our district that has more time in with intervention and her own personal practice that works with this, and how she's worked in hospitals with students to help us understand the needs of what's going on with our kids. So as far as retention though, we are doing such a good job. When a student does come to us, we have grants. Just this year alone, I processed 145 student grants. And I see every single one of the 1040s that comes through that meet those requirements. Examples of other supports, we're buying kids shoes, we're buying kids extra scrub tops, stethoscopes, whatever a student needs. Now we have NTHS coming on, and if they are unable to apply for that, we can help them with that. CTSO information. So the retention of keeping our kids that Mr. Welsh always talks about, our high retention numbers, is because we're keeping those kids in with all of that. So at this point, Shelley and I would just really like to stand for any questions if you have about homeless youth, but we wanted to give you just a quick overview.
Thank you. If they're foster kids, how could they be homeless?
They're not homeless. A foster student either lives in a group home or they're living with a family member, right?
You indicated you were gonna try to see if they were homeless.
So it's two different kind of areas we have to focus on, legally and morally. What's the right thing to do for everyone is to take care of our individuals that are homeless and our foster. With recent changes in legislation under the Everyone Succeeds Act, it separated them into two pots, if you will, for us to be able to monitor. So we're monitoring all of them, and our counselors are meeting with them. We do demographic cards and find out if there's housing insecurity, if they're living in foster care, so that we can find out which way we need to monitor or support them in either way.
If we find out they are homeless, what do we do with it?
We are working to identify any resources and supports we can provide. We do not receive federal monies for that, but we do have an MOU with Homeless Youth Connections that will send a case manager directly to our campus and identify resources and supports that the family might need for that. We're also working with the member high schools they're from to be able to provide transportation. They can do mileage reimbursement, helps make sure they're on the free and reduced lunch programs, and all of that in collaboration with the high schools. Great questions.
I want to thank you for the presentation. That's the reason I had asked is because I wanted to know what really what the student population was of foster kids at West-MEC. But it looks like you were saying, some of the challenges that we have is you're sort of playing detective, right, through the applications that you receive and the questions you ask and all that. The two students that we have in West-MEC, it seems like a very small number compared. I wonder if that's, I imagine it's not representative of the overall student population. Seems to like 2 out of 2,550 students that we have now. So it seems almost as if the challenge, and you kind of alluded to it, seems like the challenge starts at the home high school. The counselors are there identifying these students and making sure that they are getting the grades, filling out the applications. Is there any work?
Great faith. Thank you for that question. Great faith in our homeschool counselors that are meeting with students and giving their students, all students, West-MEC information. They're going into special education classrooms, they're going into geometry classrooms, they're making announcements over the PA, they're bringing recruiters in to do application workshops. So I believe that they are doing their due diligence with all students to make sure that they know about West-MEC.
Yeah.
But to your point, I also think sometimes our students, because of the circumstances that they've had that led them to be in foster care, they might be credit deficient, making it harder for them to have time in their schedule to come to us. Even though it's amazing, it's wonderful, they want to be here. So sometimes they'll choose to be in one of the wonderful high quality CTE programs on their campus to be able to meet those graduation requirements while getting a CTE experience. It might just not be with us because they're missing 2 English classes and there's only 4 years to get everything in.
Yeah.
So they might be doing some of that, but our counselors on the campuses are making sure they're finding other ways to connect to CTE to do that too. And sometimes the students self-perceive a barrier to come and may not have even expressed their interest in West-MEC to their counselor to be able to come. So we have a really high focus on that this year with the new rules, that's part of our counselor advisory to make sure every student has that opportunity. And what are we doing? What are your practices at your campuses to help support that? And we are engaging some of that in some of our recruitment that we're doing as well. And then also to overcome some of the credit deficiencies. We do have a student success action plan that all the West-MEC counselors on their campuses know about. So if a kid is missing a C or better in an English class, here's a process to still be able to apply and be considered. So that everyone still has a chance to overcome some of those barriers that they faced.
Yeah, because that's still a large population. 40% of 40% of 14,000 students, that's quite a big number.
Yeah, high school students throughout the state, so
Yeah,
not
state.
Maricopa, not West Valley,
Yeah,
so,
correct.
yes.
And that foster care number is very much aligned with what our homelessness number is every year too. We really
Really?
don't have a large quantity of homeless students in our district each year, so it's almost number for number.
Because of that high risk person that they are.
Yeah.
And the families that they live with, and are they able to get them to West-MEC, which is why transportation could be
Mm.
just a great key for us.
So it might make a difference in our numbers in coming years.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you talked about foster and it just triggered a thought and a question. Foster kids switch schools a lot.
Depending on who they're living with or the group home that they're in.
Our enrollment in West-MEC programs, how many of them fit that model of I've switched schools a lot? Or just because the counselors have to get to know the kids and it takes a year or two because they only meet with them once or twice a year? Just on the whole, I guess, the whole structure of education. Foster kids are gonna fall through the cracks, not get to meet their counselor, and probably not learn about West-MEC.
And that is a risk, but I think with all districts now having to have a focus on foster youth, not just us, that there's gonna be some extra steps at their high school to make sure they're reaching out and having those conversations. The other wonderful thing is our kids are so proud to be part of West-MEC that when they are transferring schools, we get calls and emails almost immediately that says, this student just arrived at our door to register. They said they were part of West-MEC over at Liberty. Can you tell me what program they're in, what time it is? Because I want to make sure it stays in their schedule now that they're at Tolleson. So we're making sure that that continues to follow them, and the kids are self-identifying as they get through the door to register because they're so happy to be here.
Big really.
Yes.
You know, Mr. Ramirez, you make a great point. One of the things that drives a lot of the challenges that you see is graduation requirements and state testing and accountability. Because if I'm sitting as a high school principal and I know I have a certain number of students that I have to test, and if they don't pass that class, then I'm gonna get dinged on my graduation rate. Oftentimes, that takes precedent over the West-MEC opportunities. Along with the other challenges of transportation. You know, if they have to pass English 2 or they have to take the state assessment in English 2 and pass that, all that's a part of their accountability. And what you don't want to do is have to stand in front of a microphone and find out or answer the question, why you're a C school district now when you were a B last year. And so it's all those little things that add up to the accountability A through F piece. So as what they're talking about, I'm just kind of reliving many years of my past of all the challenges that students, whether they're homeless or foster, or the mobility rate of students that transfer from place to place have to overcome. It's tremendous.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So, next is, a new first read policy, Ms. Mays. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman. Thank you, members of the governing board. What we have before you is policy JLDB, restraint and seclusion as a first read. You may be wondering, why wasn't this included in the manual adopted? And that's because Shelley Tom came to me and said, we need to look at this policy because we potentially have a student coming into the district and we don't have it on paper from our governing board. So that's why it's not in your manual. So what this is to allow us to establish policies and procedures if we have a student that is in the district that potentially may need restraint or seclusion. I'm thinking that it may have been taken out of the policy because as we've grown, we potentially may have those students. But I've noticed that certain policies were taken out that were recommended because they just didn't apply to West-MEC students. So that could be why originally it wasn't listed there. So what's before you is to review it as a first read. We have Shelley Tom here to answer any questions that you might have about the policy. But I do believe we have a student that is moving into the district that is maybe.
We have 2 students that under their IEP for their high school do require that the staff that's working directly with them have this particular training that provides de-escalation skills as the first method of anything you do. And if necessary, to use restraint training. to be able to provide that student safety for them and the other students around them. So the staff that is already going to be involved with those two students, two different campuses for us, have been trained in that. So again, hoping that de-escalation is all we need, and knowing that the school that these two students are coming from work very hard to make sure these students are ready to transition to a comprehensive campus and have the supports necessary, that it is unlikely that we're going to be engaging this regularly, but we want to be able to have the tools available to us that their IEP demands.
Members' questions? So I have one. What happens if so you provide restraint training, correct? So, okay, to teachers, is that correct?
To the teachers of these particular students.
Of these particular students. So what happens if the training fails and the teacher and or student is seriously injured?
So we are, again, very optimistic that that's not going to be a concern, but the training teaches several different de-escalation skills to hopefully not get to the point where there's a physical altercation. If it does, the staff can first use defensive moves where you're just blocking, so you're not getting hit, no one else is getting hit. You can evacuate the room and just keep an eye through the building while we're calling student support, whether it's an administrator that's been trained for additional support, or if it's imminent threat to others, we can always call the police as a way to avoid having to get into situations in which someone could be seriously injured. But the restraints that have been taught are nationally recognized and have been monitored and updated over time to have holds that are what I would say minimally restraining, in that you're unlikely to hurt the student while you're holding their arms down at their side or something along that nature. So it does minimize the risk to them. And if a teacher is uncomfortable, evacuation of the room is the first priority.
And to answer your question about if a student is hurt or a staff member is hurt, if it's a student, then they go through senior time to go through the trust for any care that they may need and follow up. If it's an employee, they go through the workers' comp process through human resources.
Members, yes, Ms. Wiley.
It says new policy, JLDB. Why is it a new policy? We've never had this before. Why are we adding it now? What makes life different?
Because we have the students that are moving into the district.
So you have a student that wants to come here. You have
Two students who were enrolled with us at West-MEC through that blind application process. So we don't know that they have an IEP or what's on their IEP until they're enrolled. But once we received information.
So this IUP is what indicated to you that we need to do this new policy?
Yes, it's a special education document that outlines all the supports and services a student with a discipline must have. And one of those is the restraint training. So our campus administrator, our teacher, and two of us from the ESS department were trained as well to provide additional support and not to let that teacher feel alone on an island to be able to do that. But I believe, in my personal opinion, from the last several years being here, we didn't have any students come to us with that. Therefore, I don't believe it was taken to the board to adopt the policy. But now that we have these two students where their IEP says you shall do this, we want to bring this before the board to be able to have the ability to support them according to this legal document of the IEP, saying that that's an option to pursue.
Did you borrow this language from another school district, or is it something
We
that?
did review several policies from, I think 3 or 4 school districts. We also had our attorney review it, and she made some recommendations as well.
Mhm.
Members, this is the first read, so if members have concerns or questions, it will come back next month. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. The final agenda item for future agenda items under information discussion is discussion on cell phone usage by staff. Hello again, yes. Well, HR always gets the podium quite a bit, so.
Thank you, Chairman Pingerelli. So we are bringing this particular agenda item back for discussion. It was approved by the governing board on July 12th at the last meeting. And we understand that there were several other concerns that the board members wanted to discuss regarding this issue. So we are bringing it back for your discussion.
Mr. Miglerino.
Well, as you probably know, I'm the board member, but let me be brief on this because I don't want to beat a dead horse to death. But I can't understand, and I apologize, I was not here at that meeting. I think I've missed like 2 meetings in 8 or 10 years. I just can't understand for the life of me what West-MEC gets by taking $600 from employees that use their cell phone for our benefit. I don't get it. Just to make it simple, there's 3 pages of why, how we use them. My request would be that each of you read those carefully and say, is it really worth taking $600 away from you? Now, I know there's some plans that are less than 50 a month, you know, with ABC carrier, but my plan is $70 or $80 a month, and it's not a grandiose plan. So I don't get it. What I would like to do is have you read those 3 pages. I would like the administrative staff to look at those employees that really have to have one to function. I can't imagine Mr. Heath or Miss Medea running their building or the whole facilities or the millions of dollars worth of building and equipment without a cell phone. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I see the 43,000. I see we got 60 or 70. What I'm asking the administration to do is come back to us with a number of people that need them for the reasons stated in those 3 pages. And then further, I would like to request that we have an agenda item in September to vote on it. Now, I know, Mr. Straka, that all the years I've been on the board, that's your thing about cell phone stipends. I'll personally pay for yours. If that helps. But I just want to keep it simple. You know, it's open for discussion. But my plea is that we ask the administration, come back to us, how many really need it? I'm even willing to, you know, maybe it's not 600. Maybe we go to 599. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miglerino. Members, any questions, comments?
So we don't agree on this one.
Correct.
And there's a couple of reasons why. I am not a big proponent of an electronic leash. And a cell phone is an electronic leash. I just, let's call it what it is. People have tendency to look at it. And so what we know is, anytime you look at your cell phone, it's a 20-minute interruption to what you're doing. So it's not so much when they're at work, but when they're home with their family, what I would like to see is when you leave West-MEC, you don't look at email. You don't get phone calls. You are with your family. But if you look at your emails 3 times during the week, that's an hour a week you're taking away from your family. That's 2 days a year we're taking away from your family for this stipend. And at the end of the day, what schools have been running fine with millions of dollars of equipment. And in the last 20 years, everyone has to have a cell phone to run a school. We've been running schools for 200 years. We think we need a cell phone. But here's the other thing that this becomes, and it becomes complicated. Because we provide a cell phone, it becomes a district device. It becomes actionable for a freedom of information request. Your West-MEC emails, your web browser history, your texts, your pictures. Ask Hunter Biden about his freedom of information request. The pictures have been released to the media of him. In the Trump investigation, Peter Storks and Struck and Lisa Page, similar thing, their romantic emails have been made public because they had a government cell phone. I think this is an intrusion to our staff. We have these laptops in front of us because of Ms. Brown's foresight of, hey, if you put your West-MEC email on your phone and there's a freedom of information request, everything on your phone can be accessed. What, if we're not going to do that to the board, why should we expose our staff? And really, I would think, my thought is staff should not have West-MEC email on their phone. It's their personal device. And when you go home, you don't worry about West-MEC. You don't look at that email at 8 o'clock at night, and it can wait till morning.
Mr. Straker, we just don't agree. You know, I will die tonight not agreeing with that dialogue.
But it is a fact.
You know, and maybe there are 3 other people that might agree with. You know, I'm not gonna argue it anymore.
But is it worth?
Just makes no sense.
Is
Everything you said to me doesn't make any sense. I won't say anymore. You can get the last one.
Well, I would like to weigh in on this, and I'd like to go and, because I have investigated this and, you know, as chair, you know, it has come to me to put this on as an actionable item. We had already reviewed this, we had voted on it, we voted it down. But I wanted to have the discussion because for me, it's a issue where it's very difficult. So if a employee has a cell phone and we pay $600 per year, and I've looked at private industry, for example, asset management companies, etc. They pay their employees, but they're private companies. They give them $500 to $700 a year. But we have something in Arizona that many of you are aware of is the gift clause in the Arizona Constitution. So for a stipend of that value, which is a big monthly payment, how do we disaggregate the personal use, which is from the administrative use? So example, how do we handle if, for example, 5% of the time an employee is using the cell phone for legitimate, but 95% it's for personal use? Well, that runs afoul of the Arizona Constitution gift clause. And as the reason for my vote on this, the way I voted, was simply based on that principle in the Arizona Constitution. And also, you know, we are all elected members and we take an oath of office to uphold not only the US, but the Arizona Constitution. And I just don't see any easy way of disaggregating the two. It's just like me using my computer here. I use my Apple computer, which I don't charge West-MEC for it because it's not possible. But in 3 or 4 hours here that I use it, and maybe 10 more hours, how do I easily disaggregate that from the entire value of my computer system? So, or we'll take another example, an employee is at home and the employee is doing work for West-MEC at home and they have office furniture, office chairs. Are we now, and they use it, you know, maybe 20% of the time. How do we collect that information? How do we disaggregate it? Because there really is a gift clause issue here. I've talked to policy people. I've talked to a constitutional lawyer, actually a couple of constitutional lawyers, and I just can't wrap myself around it. You know, if there were some way of disaggregating it easily, you know, without all of these administrative reports, you know, I would be willing to look at that, because but, you know, we use our cars, we use our chairs, you know, we give a compensation package here at West-MEC, which is very, you know, I think very competitive, very good, and, I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Chair, so I wanted to make a point on this. So I carry 2 phones. You say people can't manage that? I do it on a daily basis. One is my state phone. One with my personal stuff on it is my personal phone. I sign a letter of understanding and their responsibility, knowing that that's audible at any given time. I'm intelligent to know that this is not gonna be chatting with my family. That's why I have this phone that I could chat with my family. They're on me all the time, especially when I travel, especially when I'm doing events, when I'm out there talking throughout the state of Arizona. Because I'm a professional, I know the difference and the accountabilities between the two. I would imagine an educator who has many years in the industry would probably be capable to manage their assets. On the other note, like, just like I agree with the chair said, they don't give me a stipend for this. This is issued. So they pay the bill. I don't see anything. I get nothing extra when I leave. I hand it back in. It belongs to the state of Arizona. So, and they can ask for it at any given time, by the way. And that's part of the memorandum is if I need your phone, you don't argue, you just give me your phone. Because it is audible by the state and all the agreements by our state constitution. So knowing that, I mean, a stipend, I agree that what the gift clause in our state constitution does speak to that, but if there was a way just to issue it and take it back and whatever, everything on it belongs to the state, everything from that black thing right there to the case. It's all issued. It doesn't belong to me. I know that. Totally comprehend it, has no problem, doesn't keep me up at night because I don't sleep with it. So I'm intelligent enough to know how to use a cell phone. And unfortunately with today's business, sometimes I've used that at the airport where I can't have my laptop or between meetings and I get a call and I can't answer it. And some meetings go like right now, 7, 8 o'clock at night. I have to be able to be on my phone. Now I'm on salary, I'm not an hourly. So that's probably the other part of it is, you know, I don't have the hourly clock ins. So then I can tell you that a lot of DES right now is working remote. They're using electronics and state stuff. My department, Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity, does the same. I can tell you most police officers have 3 cell phones. Department of Public Safety, all of your police officers and fire departments, most of your emergency responders and first responders also have many phones. So I wouldn't alleviate the responsibilities, but I would say the stipend, I agree, maybe that's the wrong approach. Maybe the right approach is just issue it. And then
the problem is that, you know, and I can't say for, I mean, that's a good point. You make a very valid point with issuance, but, you know, for example, legislators, other state officials, they receive no cell phone. They receive none. And we don't receive it because we simply don't receive it. The problem with that analysis, though, is inevitably someone is going to use that state issued phone for other, it's human nature, Mr. Garcia, they're going to use it. And once they use it once, you have now violated the gift clause.
so there should be a discipline plan. Obviously, we signed a lot of paperwork for this, so it's not, I don't want to make an impression. It's like, hey, I pick up my phone, I'm gone.
But
There's a lot of agreements.
Employees versus a statewide
I am a state employee.
educational system which is burgeoning, and I think you know, is bulging. And so I mean, I wanted to have the discussion because I realized there's consternation, and I realized, but this was an item that we, at least for this year, we voted on. We considered and we voted on. And but I think it's food for thought, and I will just leave my comments there, but I do take your statements as well.
Can I just make one comment here?
Yes.
My only issue is that if we have an issue or a crisis, nobody has to answer their phone now. Who we call. So I just ask you to consider that, it's hard to run an effective operations if nobody has to answer the phone. If we have something that goes down, we have a crisis, we have a shooting incident, there's not phones in our labs, so nobody can communicate. Just ask you to consider.
And follow up with that comment, Dr. Spurgeon, does that become a disciplinary issue if I don't answer my phone? We've gotten some interesting feedback from some employees asking those uncomfortable questions. What am I obligated to do now? I know I'm a salaried employee, but if I decide that I don't want to have my cell phone for pub or for district use, does that mean I'm gonna get in trouble if a call is made to me and I just decide I want to be with my family this evening? So or do I even put my cell phone number on I used to put my cell phone number on my business card. So now I'm less accessible for the parents, for the community, for the students. So we're getting some questions from employees for sure.
You know, I can even go back to when I was at American Express. We were told not to send emails after 5 o'clock. Because as a leader, your staff and other people feel like, oh, that's my director, I better respond to his email at 7 o'clock at night. If Dr. Spurgeon sends an email out at 7 o'clock at night, the staff is going to open it up. And it may be informational, but I've now taken away from family time. We were told not to call people, not to send emails, because it creates a burnout. And so it is a fine line. We're kind of, no matter what we do, you know, but we need to provide a work-life balance for our staff. They will burn out. People don't like to be on the clock 24/7. Also, you know, your subconscious works on things. And if you're always thinking about West-MEC, your subconscious can't come up with that creativity that it needs because it hasn't disengaged long enough. So we're suppressing creativity by keeping people active as well. I mean, it's how do you get someone to answer the phone, but how do we balance work-life balance as well?
Mr. Strake, I said I didn't want to say anymore, but when I ran for the board, because I wanted to help students, help programs, and help staff. Now I see us locked into ideology, politics, and you need minutia. Why, I can't believe we spent the last half hour on this subject and going nowhere. You can't, your example at American Express doesn't even compare to what Miss Mays or Mr. Heath or Miss Medina, most of them out there. I'm not saying we need to have 70 cell phones. I'm just asking, come back to us, those that really need it, unless, I did my own survey. I called other districts. Do you have a cell phone stuff? The answer is yes. None of them have gone to jail. Thank you.
Mr. Miglino, thank you. And I would like to make a follow-up comment and just, respectfully, Mr. Miglino, disagree that this is ideological. This for me is not ideological. This is just a statement of what we interpret as the law and the gift clause issue and the ability to disaggregate it and to avoid what could be, a litigious situation. So this has nothing to do, in my view, and in my viewpoint, based on any ideological stance. In fact, I don't see this as an ideological issue.
Well, it's minutia, but has our attorney told us we can't do it?
No, but our attorney has told us that the cell phones are subject to freedom of information requests.
Okay, thank you for that information.
We would also, so that would mean you have to retain that data for 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
On a regular basis. IT has to back up all those phones and collect your pictures, your web activity.
Thank you for that
so forth.
information.
It becomes a ridiculous thing for.
It is ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mace. Thank you, Dr. Spurgeon. Thank you, members. Like to move to the last item, which is a request for future agenda items, members, any future agenda items.
Already asked for one.
What?
Let me get why you in this agenda item.
Ask the administration and bring it back and consideration of the board.
Yes,
Want to recap, what we talked about with, adding military stuff to the tree. Also something, that they do at NAU is they actually have pictures of some military service members on their wall from the class. That would really be something like that, especially since most of, students know each other. And, you know, that shows a pro-military stance in school, that I think would be really cool.
Well, for the students, you know, we learned that students take enormous pride in their pictures on those walls.
Oh, they love it. I've seen it themselves. We did it, but yeah, that's what I would say.
thank you, thank you. Members, any other items?
We had an item on addressing the vacation and sick time.
Okay,
We talked about that in March and we were going to bring it back. And I think we've talked about it a few times. I haven't seen it pop up on the agenda.
okay. Okay. Okay, so I will work with Dr. Spurgeon on that item. And we will get that agendized.
And we've had some, just, it's not an agenda item, but like Miss Mays. I didn't realize her phone number was the same as Jack, and we have your cabinet, but maybe if you could send out, if you're okay with the board contacting cabinet members, their contact information, what's their office line and their email, so, because I don't have a way to ask HR questions because Jack's gone, or Dr. Erb's gone, and so could we just get those contact information?
Thank you. Any other items, members? If not, we are at 7:45. Another very robust meeting and discussions by all. I want to thank everybody. So do we need a motion? We don't need a motion. We need a motion for
I'll move that we adjourn.
You would, and I will second. Okay, all right, Mr. Garcia, you can take my second.
I'll be the same.
We are adjourned. We don't need to do that, do we, through?
It's either way.
Yeah. Okay,
Interesting.
thank you, Ms. Brown.